Hi, I'm Alex Howard, and welcome to Conscious 2, and welcome to Something from Nothing, a 3-hour live stream with Stuart Davis. Over the next 3 hours, we're going to be exploring how you can birth your creative vision into the world. We'll be going into some teaching, some practical exercises, and also some interaction and discussion. And if you guys at home want to be part of this, the best way to do so is you'll see below this video, there's a comment section. And you can post questions and comments and sharings in there. In the last 30 minutes or so of today's event, I'll put some of those questions to Stuart. When we're watching things on the internet, it's very easy to sit there and just passively watch something and disappear onto Facebook and Twitter and whatever else. And at Conscious 2, we really try to encourage you to be as though you were here in the room with us, to really have the experience you would have if you were part of this workshop. We really try to capture the intimacy and transmission of an in-person event. But we can only do that if you give us your full attention. And of course, if you were here, hopefully you wouldn't be going off onto Facebook, Twitter, or whatever else. The only time we allow you to go to Facebook and Twitter is if you are tweeting or sharing what's happening in the event. We're also going to be talking towards the end of today's event about a 6-month online course with Stuart, where he's going to be diving a lot deeper into these ideas. And in the email you probably received just now, sending you the details of how to join us, there's also further information in there as well. So I firstly also want to welcome our in-person audience. Thank you guys for being here. In a sense, you guys are the voices of people at home, so no pressure whatsoever. And I want to welcome Stuart.
How are you, brother?
I'm really good.
Hello, friends at home and abroad.
At this point, I normally say, so-and-so is, and I give like a short kind of introduction. But it's not very easy to do with you, Stuart. And I just want to say at the top as well, before we come into kind of you and your background, that I've met a lot of people over the last few years of Conscious 2. I've done a lot of interviews, a lot of these kind of live stream events, and people often say to me, friends often say to me, so who have you met that's like really kind of surprised you? And for the last few months, I've been saying, since we met at Ken Wilber's Loft, we did an event there back in October, I've been saying, Stuart Davis, he's totally awesome. And not just awesome from the point of view of being an artist musician we'll come into, but I'm also incredibly excited seeing you coming forward as a teacher of this side as well. So I just want to say I really appreciate you being here. It's been a real treat just hanging out the last few days, and you're just a very, very cool person, I think. Not that I'm...
Thank you very much for your kind words. I think you've made the perilous mistake of inviting a musician into your home and into your local community, and the danger is always that they will never leave.
This is right. I have to say, my wife did say, is he going to be completely wild or completely crazy? But she's also loved having you here, so thank you, buddy.
It is, it's all of that. I mean, there's a lot of wildness and craziness and all of that. It's certainly, it's not just persona. I love to, security, intruder, talk about wild and crazy people. No, the wildness and the craziness is authentic and genuine then, but also I feel privileged and excited to be participating in this with you and to take up a new role and position in what it is to engage in a creative endeavor. And so it's a new experience for me to go over the threshold from purely the artistic side, purely the creating side, to getting to participate in the great privilege, which is really, I think, one of the great miracles of existence is people creating something from nothing. Our entire course is this community, this gathering, this tribe of folks focused around bringing something into fruition that's truly important and valuable to them. And I truly feel that is a huge privilege. So I'm really excited to be here.
So, as I was saying at the start, it's often, for you particularly, it's difficult to say, well, who is Stuart Davis? Because not only are you a musician, a singer-songwriter, you've also produced TV series. So how do you define yourself as a starting point?
Well, maybe one way would be like a human collage. There's one of the great benefits and gifts of engaging on a spiritual path, and especially an integral spiritual path and artistic endeavors, is that the range of options and possibilities is so vast and so deep that I think the central challenge of my life is narrowing it down to the few that I can truly engage deeply with. So it is an embarrassment of riches in the sense of all the things, especially in today's day and age with the internet and what has become a global community. The passion that I feel for music is duplicated in the passion that I feel for making television and writing films. I paint, I do comedy, and they're all uniquely wonderful and singular in their own ways. And every time I've taken up a new medium, it's certainly not that I've mastered each of them. It's certainly not that I feel like I have a command of each one of those mediums. But what definitely happens is that a new dimension of myself is activated, and then I find whole new muscles and realms of exploration that can really, it's kind of like an interior or inward cosmology. It's like being an inward astronaut, and you get to explore all of these interior vast landscapes. It's like going to exoplanets or different worlds, but it's all within the self, and it's all immediately available. So how I would describe myself, I think previously when we talked, I said that I was an aspiring human. I think that is still an accurate description. It contains all of the artistic endeavors. It also includes my spiritual practices. I have a long relationship with Zen and other contemplative disciplines, contemplative
Have we got a mic issue?
Christianity.
Yeah. I mean, if you tell Nick, we'll put him on the other hand. So we just have a slight... This one here is probably better. Can you come and mic Stuart up?
You bet. This
The beautiful, yeah, just swap them over, yeah.
Gotcha.
This is the beauty of live broadcast. For those people that maybe are thinking, this is another one of those pre-recorded webinars that people do. I'm on a headset mic here, so I'm good.
There we go. I'm going to put this one in my pocket and actually
Just take it home.
shoplift it. Shoplift this, take it home for the little souvenir. So did they get much of that, or should I repeat my answer?
They got it.
They did, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think the short answer is aspiring human, and that includes all of the creative endeavors and the spiritual ones. And frankly, as we get a little bit more into the story, sorry. I also think that there's a lot of, they're nearly synonymous. You know, the deeper that you get into the creative realms and disciplines, the more that you find the overlay and compatibility, and they really synergize each other, and we'll get to more of that in a minute.
Well, I remember you were saying to me, I think it was last night, when you first picked up a guitar, what that experience was like. Because I just want to touch a little bit on just how you came into being an artist, in a sense. Because as we talk about the creative process and people kind of birthing their own creative projects, I think it's nice people to plug into just a little bit about how that birthed inside of you. So yeah, just tell me the story. It's kind of beautiful, like what happened when you first played a guitar.
You know, when you look back on your life, there's these instances, and they may not be great in number, but they're these watershed moments, really clear instances when an avalanche kind of occurs on the inside. And for me, the first one, and continuing to this day a central one, was the day that I learned to play guitar. My dad taught me 3 chords on a guitar in our living room, and it was as though I had contacted physically a part of my own anatomy that I had not had access to before. When I held that guitar and I played those chords, it truly just, like tumblers on a safe door, they just dropped into place and the door swung open, and I realized, oh my gosh, this is, with total certitude, I think I was 11 years old, I knew day one that I was going to do this for the rest of my life. I knew I had discovered something totally pivotal about my entire life story. In fact, I felt certitude that I was going to be a professional musician. I just, like, my life kind of, I had this, it wasn't a psychic event, but it was a kind of intuiting of what the rest of my life would entail to a large degree. But I didn't tell anyone even, because I knew it would sound stupid for an 11-year-old to say, guess what? I just learned 3 chords, and now I know I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I'm going to be a musician.
I mean, let's be honest, there are some musicians that 3 chords are all they've ever needed.
That's true.
But looking at your body of work, I think it's true to say you went significantly beyond 3 chords.
I got addicted to chords, and I went and learned a bunch more. But I went into my basement day one, and I played 5 to 6 hours a day. And more importantly, I began writing. Day one, the the language of music, the vocabulary of those chords and melodies was immediately linked for me with writing songs. And there was not two stages. It was just immediately I have to write songs with these chords. So I didn't so much learn other people's songs as I began to write my own immediately and learn some as an augmentation of that. But fast forward 10 years, I wrote, it was probably 150 songs before I got one that I would say is still valuable to me today.
I mean, that alone is an incredible number. And I know we're going to come to a little bit later today, the kind of, sometimes the pain of the creative process. And it just makes me think of how many times people can do something a few times and go, well, I clearly can't do that. To even write 150 songs alone sounds like a career's worth of work.
Yes.
To get to that point before getting something that you actually feel satisfied by it.
Yes.
That's kind of remarkable.
It helps if you're deluded. And what happened for me is that every time, and this continues to this day, I think it's a feature of the creative process, which is you, like a woman giving birth, you have to have forgotten what it was before the previous time on your second birth. And if you did remember or you did know, you probably wouldn't go through that process again.
Right.
And creatively, for me, I wrote 150 very, very, very bad songs. But every time I was writing a song, I believed, this is the one. I can feel this is the one. Now, eventually it was the one. But it was years and years, probably a decade. I mean, I don't think there's anything from the first 10 years that I would still perform or that is anywhere active in my catalog. However, much more importantly than what is the enduring life of those artifacts is what was the emotional experience for me as a writer. That is the central thing that transformed my life, which is something from nothing, this very course, which is the experience that I had 150 times of there's nothing. I go into a room, something appeared, it's in the form of a song, it carried all of this emotional import for me, it changed permanently how I felt about whatever that subject was. It was therapeutic, curative, and it saved my life. I mean, it is not an exaggeration to say I'm totally certain I would be dead if I didn't have music to function as a catharsis and a transformation for me through those adolescent and teenage years. So did I get any keepers? No, but it saved my life.
Yeah.
And it acquainted me with the fact that I don't need an intermediary. I don't need an external authority. I can go within myself and access this totally mysterious, enigmatic force, and it will deliver wonders and surprises to me, literally, ceaselessly, without end for the rest of my life. That fundamentally altered how I understood life.
Yes. And I think it's also worth saying, we're going to come obviously a lot more as we go through the session, some of the different elements and stories of your own creative journey, but also to touch on your own spiritual path, because in addition to having this lineage, again, which we'll talk about in a little bit, of creativity, you've also been an active seeker, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
Just say a few words about that as well.
Well, that is an interesting part of how this became a circle and not just a line, which was it started with those 10, 15 years of creative enterprise and writing songs, and that became making albums. And eventually, along the creative path, I discovered spiritual practice, actually through, I dedicated one of my records to Ken Wilber, and I went to hang out with him. We struck up a friendship, and he said, you should really take up some mystical practices, some esoteric spiritual practices, and he laid out a menu of options for me, and I literally went around and tried them all. I tried Sufism, contemplative Christianity, some Hindu practices, and then when I walked into a Zen temple one day, again, sort of like the way that when I picked up a guitar, I immediately found a part of my body that was missing. When I walked into a Zen temple, I just had this somatic, instant recognition that this was my home, and I knew it was going to be my practice. Took up that practice, and through the next decade of contemplative practice in Zen and Buddhism, that line turned back into a circle and eventually led us back to what we're going to talk about today, something from nothing. And I, through Zen, encountered a reframing and a renewal of what I understood my creative practice to be. And suddenly, through spiritual experiences, I began to see that actually mysticism and these esoteric practices are very nearly synonymous with this enigmatic source which gives rise to all of these phenomena and experiences in my creative life. And then I began to think and feel that the true lineage that I'm a part of, the primordial lineage that I'm a part of, is this one which enacts something from nothing. And I began to trace that like a thread, or pull it like a rope, and see where it would go down these canyons. And it went back in time, and kind of like a reversal conveyor belt, I could see oh, this is actually how I came into existence as a human being. Like my mom and dad got together, were pulled together by an emotional force, and through this coupling created a human being, something from nothing. Who even knows where people ultimately are issued from? And then I traced that back and saw that religion, civilization, culture, phonemes, and then I began to try to wrap my head around something as simple but as significant as the first time a human being ever uttered a signifier. That I could feel in my bones that there was a moment in human history where there was no such thing as a signifier, there was no such thing as a referent. We had no way of abstracting and representing something that wasn't present. And then it happened in a human being that emerged that had never been there before. And when I really started to feel emotionally into my tradition as a human being and what has been brought into existence that didn't exist before, it totally blew my mind. And then I could feel immediately, this is a primordial lineage. It preceded every institution that exists in humanity. It goes back before humanity. It tentacles out into all of the hominid species, and then all the way back to everything that preceded us before there was anything with legs or eyes. You can trace it all the way back to the Big Bang, of course. That's where it's going. And what's on the other side of the Big Bang? What's on the other side of that threshold? Nothing, but not the nothing which is the absence of anything, but a totally spectacular, ineffable pregnancy, this ever gestating potentiality which can't be described or known, but nonetheless can be directly accessed. And so that is what turned into the circle. My creative life led to my spiritual life, and then my spiritual life looped back around and showed me my own creative life again anew. And that's how we ended up here today talking about something from nothing, because I really feel that it's everyone's lineage. If you can hear and see, and the signal of my voice is reaching you somewhere in the world or in this room, you're a member of this lineage. And when you can see it with those fresh eyes, you also notice that there's never been an occasion of a human being who didn't live a totally singular, unique existence. That's all there ever has been for every single human being. It's not possible for us to truly fundamentally duplicate anything. I mean, we can propagate, we can see permutations, but there is no duplicate lives, and there never has been. And so intrinsically, innately, it is the most fundamentally, immediately available thing to us, and I think it's also the defining feature of our species.
And also for people that have never felt they're part of a teaching, like they feel they've grown up in a Christian household or they've gone to Buddhism and they never quite felt they were part of something. As you say, this is a lineage that we all get to be part of.
That's exactly what I think is the most fundamental and critical feature of it, which is you don't have to do something to earn your place in this lineage. You do not have to be certified by an external authority. You don't need an intermediary. I'm not saying that there is not value to intermediaries, but in this instance, what is necessary is what you came into the world with. The only thing that's in question is the degree or depth to which you wish to cultivate that and enact it in your own life. And personally, I've never met a person, I don't think it's possible for a person to exist that doesn't have something truly unique and singular to offer, that is theirs and theirs alone, and that will change and improve the world if they bring it forth. I just think that is the central fundamental aspect of being a sentient, self-reflexive being.
And sometimes people like you had the experience of picking up a guitar, like it's just there, and it's just there instantly. Other people, that journey can take a while to find that thing. I mean, I can talk, with my own experience. I picked up a guitar as a kid, and I wish I had that experience where I had this immediate sense of kind of talent and connection. But actually my experience was I liked it and I liked playing it, but I just wasn't very good at it.
Yeah.
But there were other things later in my life that when I came to them, like I did have a natural, like learning it was more like I was remembering things I already knew rather than having to learn something from the beginning. And it can take a while. I was in my late teens, early 20s before, and other people I know, they've been in their 50s, 60s before they discovered the thing that was their potential.
I think that's really critical. And that the romantic notions, I mean, one of the things that I think we're going to do in the 6 months of Something from Nothing is we're going to dispel some myths, romantic notions and myths about the creative process and what Something from Nothing is. And I think what you just mentioned is an important one, which is it's supposed to look a particular way. It's not. It is as singular and unique as every human being on the planet. And some people have a avalanche moment where they touch an item or whatever it is, and a big part of it's instantaneously clear, but that means nothing except what it meant in that moment. It can be, I've known many people who have come into their own in their 60s and 70s or 80s. The last days of your life might be a time when you manifest the most potent, affecting change that ripples through the relationships in your life and leaves a lasting impression, or is the great gift that you give to yourself. So I think that's a great place to start, is dispelling the myth that your process or your station in life somehow doesn't fit this protocol or the stages of development as they're supposed to be. That's just pure baloney. And I think that one of the great things that Something from Nothing can offer is that if people join us in this process over the next 6 months, we create a micro culture. We create a hermetically sealed ecosystem of creativity, which will allow us to support each other.
What's going on?
And another, I think, romantic myth that can be dispelled at this point as well, for just knocking them down like dominoes. Number 2 would be that creativity and bringing forth your vision into life is about this insular, isolated approach.
It's uniquely difficult in whatever way it is, but actually, hearing others articulate the experience as well, it's good a good reminder that that's not necessarily so.
Yeah. So is it your experience as a creator? You're an artist, I know, and a musician as well.
That's right.
That the isolation and, I mean, obviously the one component of that is that creativity is an introverted event and an introverted act. But what has brought you here today? Like, why were you interested in coming to be present for the Something from Nothing? Was it the fact that there would be other people here and that there's a social dimension to it?
Meeting everyone else here, I think, was the...
Yeah.
I guess for me, the writing and the creative process is just one part of trying to reveal more about my life and the experience of things, and through the creative process and through things like that is also a great excuse to delve into those places and find out what you're made of and what it is. So coming here felt like part of that approach of just trying to uncover what it's about. It's actually a big part of the reason why I've written in the past and turned to writing, is because it's an excuse to go to those places that some other fields and other experiences don't offer.
Yeah.
So because you never know what you might find, and if you look inwards, like you say, you can sometimes surprise yourself with what comes out.
Yeah. So that's very interesting. And taking off of that note, what I would like to hit up on the next element of this Something from Nothing is the birth and the death polarity, and how each of these creative moments and a creative undertaking involves both
a birth, and a death, and how the progression of our creative identity is unfolded and expanded through that coupling. And in a way, it's the complementarity of opposites. So, for instance, there's when I was with my father passed away a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and I was with him through the last 3-4 months of his life as he was going through the last stages of passing. And something really interesting transpired in those last few months. My dad, for his entire life, basically was a conservative Christian, and myself as a carnivalesque Buddhist practitioner, you can imagine that there was a good bit of tension and a good bit of confusion and misunderstanding. And that was something that was always hard to connect or transcend with language. We had a lot of conversations, hours and hours of conversation over years and years of him trying to understand why and how I had become a Buddhist practitioner, and me trying to understand his worldview as a conservative Christian, and really not having a satisfying resolution to that divergence. And as my dad got sicker, and as we knew that the end was approaching, and those final shifts were coming into his being, he spoke less and I spoke less, but what was really powerful for me at the end was that he wanted to hear music from me. And increasingly, toward the end of his life, our time together was me just spontaneously writing music as he was there on his deathbed. And it was all purely in the moment. I was not playing pieces I knew. I was just spontaneously writing. And what emerged, the something that emerged from that nothing, was the first time that there was this very peaceful and healing voice in the room. The music became the voice, and it said what both sides of us needed to hear, and it made peace with those two worldviews. And that reminded me of the first time that I had picked up that guitar, what could be powerful about this. And it's not just the privilege of getting to be a part of something from nothing, but it's the change that it can make in our relationship with ourselves and all the people that we love and the people that we can't love and the people that we can't meet. It opens up this tremendous potential to circumvent the blocks and confusions. But another thing happened that was even more fascinating, possibly, which was my dad, who had been a conservative Christian all of his life, and even through the last weeks, was wanting us to read the Bible and wanting us to hear these quotes about Christ and to try to get those final teachings. In the last couple days of his life, he stopped talking completely, and then the last words that he ever spoke, which were to myself and my two brothers and my mom, we were all gathered around him in a circle, and his final words were, he would drop out for an hour or two, and then he'd come back and open his eyes and be in the room, and you could palpably feel the dissolving of his ego and that frontal structure. And it was kind of like the front part of my dad that I had hung out with all of these years softened and became transparent. And something really big and present, a huge presence, began to fill the room when he would return and he would open his eyes. And we all got quieter and quieter and basked in that presence. And his final words were, when he opened his eyes, he said, "It's a strange world." And my mom said, "What do you mean it's a strange world?" And he said, "It isn't real." And the words were powerful, but the verification of where they were coming from, and all of us having been present with him up until that last moment and knowing he was leaving this realm and feeling the winking from the other side of what it was, that was the greatest privilege of my life, to be a part of that, because I also could feel that he was being born and that it wasn't just a death that we were attending to. He was dipping into this other side, and when he would come back for a little bit, he was tossing a little bit of it our way. And it was this rare, singular chance in my life to feel and be in the room with that presence of something that was both moving into that nothing, the pregnant nothing, the birth into that great, great potential, and then letting go of the something that was his life the whole time, and his story, and feeling that it was okay to let that go, and then feeling it ripple through our families. So one of the things that I would like to do now as a practice is, if you're cool with this, moving to this segment.
Yeah, and also I just wanted to say for people watching at home, the reason why I was scurrying in and out, the internet for the entire area went down for about 3 minutes.
Oh.
So people at home would have lost a couple of minutes. It's fine, the stream's back up. But just to apologise, there are most things we can control, and as Stuart and I have been talking about over the last kind of few days while he's been staying, both kind of somewhat obsessive about these kind of details. One thing we can't control is when the internet and the whole thing goes down. So have powers, but not quite those powers. So an apology to people that are watching. You will have received an email, which I'm sure you would have got, with the fact the page is back up. No doubt, if you're watching this, it's because you've also refreshed the page. For the little bit that you've missed, we will share the whole recording of the session, so you will be able to catch up what you've missed as well. So apologies. And if anyone knows anyone at British Telecom, then I'd be very grateful. Anyone in power, I'd go and have a few words.
Like to file a grievance.
Yes,
but
exactly.
maybe it was the homeopathic dose of nothing that we needed.
we went from something to nothing, and then we came back to something.
I mean, it's just a yo-yo. It goes up and down.
I'm aware that you probably jumped over the fact we want to play a couple of videos at some point as well, but we can always come back to those. I know you could see that I was kind of scurrying around with various things. So why don't we do, it's up to you, can I do the video now or do the exercise? It's completely up to you how you want to do that.
Why don't we do one video now, and then we'll do the exercise, and then another video.
Yeah, okay, great. So the first video, I believe, is the one with Tammy. Do you want to just, while Nick's just queuing up the video, just say a few words about Tammy and about the video? Yeah.
Tammy Simon, really interesting person in relation to the subject of something from nothing. Probably no one that I know in the world has spoken with and worked with more spiritual teachers. She's spent, I guess it's about 3 decades now, of going all around the entire world and speaking to every conceivable spiritual teacher from every known lineage and forming long dialogues with them about the fundamental questions of what it is to be a human being and what it is to try to dive down to the deep truths and the deep values and things of importance in existence. She's also a fierce, powerful creator. Her company is just a geyser of ceaselessly emerging content. I mean, she's personally stewarded the completion of thousands of projects. I don't even know what the number is, but I'm sure it's in the thousands, from videos, audio, artistic, books, everything you can think of in the spiritual realm. She's also a great friend of mine, and she's the godmother to my kids, and she's just one of my favorite human beings. And she's interacted with me on my creative life for decades, and so we went to speak with her about something from nothing.
Great. And that video will play now.
Yep. I'm wondering about creativity or art as maybe its own particular kind of lineage, maybe the primordial lineage. So what I found in my own life is that I did a lot of Zen and other esoteric practices, and then in the last few years have begun to recontextualize or revisit my own creative practice as maybe the primary spiritual one. Before there were civilizations, religions, or any kind of lineages at all, there was this tradition in humanity of pulling something from nothing. That's how we got phonemes, words, civilization, culture. So my first question is, as someone with such a great and deep understanding and encounter with all these traditions, do you think that creativity, that process of bringing something from nothing, is its own kind of primordial lineage? And if so, how is it distinct from the others or special?
So I might reframe the question in the way that I answer it, which is, in my view, there's a process going on, which I like your languaging of that, something from nothing. That process is being in, you could call it boundless space, emptiness, void, or you could call it the fullness of presence and resting in that fullness of feeling. And from that, something emerges. An inspiration of some kind emerges. There's some unfolding process that's incredibly original if it came from the depth of either black space or total, beautiful, bubbly presence and completion. Either one, however you want to describe it, within either aspect. So to me, that process is the same process in creativity, in the making of art, as it is in deep spiritual practice. So it's not like one is more primordial than the other, or that they're even distinct. The meditator is using their body as the instrument. This is the instrument. I am tuning to my deep felt sense, and something is coming from that. Some way that I want to give, some way that I want to love, some words that I want to say, a business that I want to make, a project of some kind, anything. The artist may not say they're sitting in meditation posture or sitting in zazen. They may be going for a walk, staring at an empty canvas, staring at an empty page, whatever the artist is doing. But it's the same process. So what I'm saying is that I believe that deep spiritual practice and artistic creativity are actually en route the same archetypal process, just using different media and mediums.
Mm-hmm. Where is it coming from? Like if you follow that thread all the way back, are we talking about going from gross body back to subtle to causal? Like what is over that threshold, that event horizon? Where is something coming from?
Right.
What is that nothing?
If we could call it anything, if I could tell you where it's coming from, it wouldn't be nothing. I would be putting a reference point on it. I'd be giving you the map. I'd be giving you the longitude and latitude, and it would be something. By its very nature, it doesn't have a longitude and a latitude. It doesn't have a place. It doesn't even have reliable descriptors. That's why you fall through the crack, and it's literally nothing. And to me, what makes a great meditation teacher, a great spiritual teacher of any kind, is the same thing that makes a great artist, and it's that quality of originality, of freshness. And you can feel it. You can feel that there's something, if it was like fresh water and it was coming from a well, it came from some geyser that was so far down and deep that, you know, it has that quality of freshness. It's come up to the surface now for the first time. It's not regurgitated or recycled. It hasn't been sitting in some weird stagnant pond that thousands of people have been drinking and spitting back up into and then saying it again and again and again. It comes from this mysterious geyser. So it comes from mystery. No location.
Excellent. So, love what she's describing, and again, she's reinforcing that coupling, not exactly synonymous, but nearly synonymous between these esoteric or mystical practices and what happens when we engage in a deep creative process. And so, what Something from Nothing is about here today, and what our tribe and community is about, is not only participating in that mysterious, powerful process of something from nothing, but making something meaningful from nothing. Specifically, something that is so significant and valuable that it could change how you view and perceive your own time on the planet. And that's the reason that I wanted to share a bit about my dad's passing and how death informed my own perspective on being an artist and a creator and what the ultimate value of this is. And I think the way that death is brought in as a reminder and a teacher is something that I would like to go through now as a bit of a practice. This is one of my favorite things to do, and it's called practice dying. And
I did tell these guys you won't do anything that was going to be too scary with them.
You don't.
And suddenly you sit here and go, "We're going to practice dying."
That's why I didn't call it actually dying. This is just practice dying.
And the door is locked. There's no way out.
Welcome to your cushioned coffin. So yeah, this is, it's another one of the myths that I think we can dispel is that there's a pejorative charge to the word dying. Do we really even understand what death is as creators, as artists? As I said, when I was with my dad, and it became so strangely clear to me that he was also being born, and that the presence that was filling this room was one of the most generative, loving, mysterious encounters I'd ever had in my life. That's death. Death is intrinsically, inextricably linked to the creative source itself. There's nothing that can be brought into being without death. Every birth is a death. Every death is a birth. And so that's what I'm getting at when I say let's practice dying. So to begin with, I just want us to start with a minute or so of basic meditation. So if you're at home, please join us in doing this. You can just remain seated just as you are. You don't need to be in the lotus or anything. And
if people have never meditated before, we don't have to do a whole thing on meditation, but just maybe 30 seconds of they could literally just close their eyes and be quiet, for example.
They could, yes. What I think that I'll do is a little bit of a thread to follow in this meditation. Is just let people focus on their breath. So this is one of the most simple, basic forms of meditation, and it's just a way to return the focus of your mind onto the wispiest object in the universe, which is your breath, an invisible item that is nonetheless totally internal to you and immediately accessible. So you can soften your gaze, let your eyelids fall down about 2/3. You don't want to close your eyes completely. There should still be some light coming through from the room, so you have contact with the outside, but your focus is softened. You're not looking at anything in particular. Just let your eyes rest somewhere out in front of you, about 6 feet. And put your focus of your mind onto your breath. Allow your breath to come in through your nostrils. Follow it with your attention into the base of your belly. As you inhale, you pause for a moment at the base of your belly, and then just follow your breath again with your attention as it rises up through your plexus, out your throat, out your nose again. And count 1 when you exhale. And on each successive exhalation, you just count the next number. And we'll go to a count of 10. If a thought comes into your mind, you just let it go and take your attention back to your breath. Continue breathing, just like that. But now I want to call a vision to your imagination. Imagine that you're floating above your body. There's no trauma, there's no tension, but you're a witness to your own body. You're the age you are now. Today is the last day of your life, and you've just risen above your body. And your awareness is relaxed and clear, but it's apart from that physical vehicle. And you see your body resting. As you feel and see your body resting, a life review begins in your mind's eye, above and around your body, beginning with a memory from your imagination or from real life of being in the womb, the first physical experience of having a body, but being inside another body. Whatever you remember or feel or imagine around that. From there, we're going to move in gradual intervals, about 5-year intervals. What I want you to do is find or feel a milestone or a marker from each of these 5-year periods. So we've been in the womb, and now we're going to move into being a small child. Is there anything that stands out for you from being a small child? Maybe your first memory. Try to contact that. Be sure to connect with the emotion of each of these memories or each of these imaginings. Let's hop forward about another 5 years. You're still a child, but you're older. You're in school, somewhere between 5 and 10 years old. What memory or milestone stands out? We hop ahead another 5 years. We're teenagers. Really strong, intense emotional years. What stands out from the ages of 10 to 15 or 16? Just pick one memory, one emotion. Now you can feel this pattern continuing forward. You're 20, early 20s, whole different phase of life. What milestone stands as that marker? What feelings are around it? Could be traumatic, Could be blissful, mundane, just whatever naturally pops up. Let's hop ahead now to late 20s, approaching 30. Some of you might be younger than that, and that's fine. If you're watching at home, we followed this thread through in those intervals, just taking every 5 years or so a memory that stands out, an important developmental moment for us. Take a few more, fast forwarding, approaching the age that you actually are now. What happened in the last 5 years of your life that stands out as a crucial moment for you? Now just take a few moments to replay that series of images, those series of moments. Recollect them in this micro life review. From the womb, through your childhood, your teens, your 20s, forward until the last 5 years. The big moments for you there. And now return your awareness again to hovering over your own body and looking down on it. Most importantly, keep contact with those feelings that came with those moments, those highlights, some of them beautiful and wonderful, some of them traumatic from your life. Keep those feelings, and now when you're looking down and imagining your body there, ask yourself, was there anything more that you wanted to offer in this life? Is your life totally satisfied and complete? Or is there something more you wanted to create, something more you wanted to offer, something you wanted to bring into reality that you haven't yet? Something that could change how your next life review will feel. When you do this again for real, which is inevitable, at some point, what do you want to be sure you have added to this story? Okay, let's open our eyes, crawl back into that body, animate those muscles and ligaments, pump the blood. You have actually been resurrected. You are resurrected entities. So, what I love about that process is that, number one, it's universal. There's no one watching who's not going to die. But number two, we just got resurrected and we're still alive. And when you feel the inevitability of your passing with the pregnant possibility of your living, that's the intersection that is the perfect place to find out what is the something you want to bring forth from nothing. I really believe this is one of the most important things we can do. And your story's not done yet. You're the author. And this project, these 6 months, are about taking claim of your place in this lineage. Knowing that it's your birthright to be a creator, knowing it's your nature to be a creator, and knowing you still have time and options and resources to make this thing that is critical and indispensable to your soul and your unique self. And that's why we practice dying.
Beautiful. It's also, I wonder if it's worth saying something as well around the feeling that comes when you contact what it is, that whatever it is, the thing that's ours to birth and ours to bring into life. It's like there's something about the level of aliveness. Think about, can't talk about practicing dying. Something about the sense of aliveness that we experience when we're on point, when we're doing what it is we're meant to do.
Yes. Critical and central. And then we're going to talk a lot about this. Steve Beckett's piece is coming up, and we're going to talk about discomfort, and that's a central part of this. But I think what you're describing is so beautiful and critical, which is this, it's this totally unique intersection of the crackling animation of feeling this thing that's gestating in you and wants to come to the fore. I mean, really all of us are mothers in this sense, and that's why the goddess and mothering is so central to the creative process. That's why the muse holds that special position in the creative realm. But when you become the home and the housing for this potentiality that wants to be animated and brought to life through you, it also is a death of sorts. And that's why I'm saying that these two tandem ends of the same baton, this unity of opposites, they're inextricable, because there's no way this thing is going to come through us unless we let go of the identity that we had before. That's the terrifying part. That's the part where we are given pause, but it's also the part that is full of exuberance and vitality. I mean, as a performer, it's one of the feelings I'm most acquainted with, but you never transcend, which is whether it's a concert or a song or the greatest creative project of your life or a new business, the butterflies, the stage nervousness, whatever it is you want to describe it as, but it's really that thing coming to life in you that's going to change your constitution. You never get over that, but it's the first signal. I mean, what's really interesting about that is that it's actually a pitch. That is a frequency vibrating in you, and you can physically feel it in your gut, in your muscles, and it changes your physiology and your biology. It's measurable. Those are the first indicators, and they're both blissful and disquieting and uncomfortable.
I know we're going to come to that more. I think it'd also be nice to hear from these guys.
Yes, definitely.
What was it like?
I would
going
love to hear
the exercise?
what you were experiencing. Who's
And
got the
who's got the
microphone?
mic?
Please, Kingsley.
You just hold the mic up there a bit. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just found it interesting to see what memories came up. That was one of the things that I found just curious. Most of them were actually happy, and I wasn't looking for happy memories at all. But that in of itself was kind of nice, actually. I wasn't looking for anything, but I was like, oh yeah, that happened and this happened, and you know, it's just nice to have like a positive retrospect. And then meditating was just, I don't know, just very centering. It's funny, I came here and I was taking the tube and the bus and everything, and so I was kind of rushing and almost had like some anxiety, and after going through that, I'm just like, because I was so late too.
It's actually quite fun.
Now I'm just, yeah. So.
What about what came up for you when you went back to your perspective above your body at the end and you thought about your story and what you'd want to add to it?
Oh yeah. Well, that was very much for me. It was just my art. Really sort of just not publishing, but putting it out there, because it's only been mine really up until now. And so that's the one thing, I guess that's the next big thing for me, is just really sharing that with as many people as possible. That's the one thing that's missing, basically.
And what's the medium of art, can I ask for other people?
My medium?
Yeah.
Video games.
Video games?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So, but I mean, it's funny because I would still say I would call myself an artist before calling myself a game designer.
Yeah.
I'm just making art. It happens to be that video games is the platform, but it's still just art. I'm talking about the same things musicians are writing about, or
Right.
directors are,
Well, you're creating a world space.
Yeah.
I mean, how could that not be an art form?
Yeah.
All of the perspectives contained within there and creating a world space. I mean, that is a major tuning fork for anybody who's going to crawl inside of that.
I agree. It's very interesting, actually. I mean, the only real inherent difference, I would say, with video games is the interactivity. I mean, that's all it is. If you boil it down, it's just interactive art, which is interesting because it's even more. It's very easy. It's to be immersive and involving. It's very easy to get just lost in whatever world is being created. So that's a very interesting notion for me. It's just it's a new way to explore, music as well and whatever else. It's just yourself.
And also, when you think about it, let's be honest. Video games reach more people than almost anything else in the world today. That is where
Said
people
with
actually live.
A bit of bitterness.
Well, I mean, as a songwriter, I can tell you that I envy your audience, profoundly and passionately.
I also think I don't know if you want to comment for a second, because I was just thinking exactly the same thing, and it's like people almost can have a hierarchy of certain art forms are more valid than other art forms. I don't know if you just want to speak to that for a second.
It's insanity. The only hierarchy that exists artistically, in my opinion, is a holarchy. And that means increasing orders of depth. And that is dependent in each instance on the artist and the artifacts that are created, the modalities used, but it's always an emanation and propagation from the artist. And if you have a deep artist, it doesn't matter what medium they're working. Look, Andrew Goldsworthy goes around and moves rocks and sticks around, and when I show up and see it, it blows my mind and I can never forget it. The medium is irrelevant. The depth and reverberation of the pitch is issued from the artist. I think video games are one of the most potently powerful potentials that there is for an artist for the foreseeable future. So really, I think it's a great point to bring up, and there's no such thing.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that's really interesting, actually, from my perspective, as a kind of as a teacher in my past, and now at an intersection. And it was really interesting doing the exercise because I'm bang slap in that intersection of moving away from something, letting something die, but still carry on living throughout, because you can't really let it die. It doesn't die. It goes with you everywhere. And moving into something that's nothing at the moment. It's kind of building, and all I know and understand is that it's vital, and you're coming out of what could be known as comfort zone, and I think everyone's been there, and you go and throw yourself into something completely different, and you've got to work with all the skills you've got. And I think that's creativity. I don't think you need to be a musician or an artist or anything. I think it's creative enough just to sort of swim in that mode for a while and feel the fear, do it anyway, and keep at it. So I felt a real sense of pride, actually, in that moment. Like, wow, like it's creative. The thing I find a little bit more challenging is how to then carve the path and see where it goes. I know that for me personally, I think communication is my medium, be it through writing or speaking to people. Lots of people know I talk a lot.
Languages, you speak like 5 languages.
And I love languages, and I think, changing your space often enough is a creative process. So whether it's moving countries or being here or going to Archway, I've never been to Archway, by the way. I love it. Changing your space and adapting to that can help with all sorts of really deep phases of your life. I mean, I can imagine when it comes to actually dying, that's changing your space in every possible aspect. So, yeah.
That's totally fascinating. I have 2 things that I just want to bounce back for you before you hand that mic away.
Okay.
Number one is, I think about the fact that you speak all of these languages and you're such an amazing polyglot. And there's a parallel in there because one of the things you encounter when you learn a language is non-translatable words or concepts.
Right.
Which is
yeah.
one of the most beautiful things about languages.
And
it's why it actually
amazing.
matters that half the world's languages are going extinct, because
Yeah.
there are signifiers that do not exist anywhere else, which means there are signifieds that are not being located and contacted anywhere else in the world other than these languages. And so when we lose a language, it's very much equivalent to losing an interior section of the rainforest. An interior section of our collective ecosystem vanishes and we never get that back. It is unrecoverable. And I think how that fits in with something from nothing is that that's what each person is. That's kind of what I'm driving at with the fact that there's something in you that doesn't exist any other person, any other place in the world. And if you don't bring forth this project, video game, book, new business, technology you might, whatever it is, then it will be lost by not being manifest or incompleted or whatever. And I think that that is a truly critical item. And so part two of what I would like to ask you from that is, what came up for you when you were doing that practice and you came back around to see your body at the end and you wanted to fill in what is next in your story? What were the things that came up?
Oh, right now you mean from now, from this point
from here forward
onwards, is to creatively communicate. And it's vast, it's not particularly focused right now, but that's where I want to go. And whether it's through, I love writing, so I want to take that further past my own personal pursuits, and just learning better how to understand people and communicate better. I don't know, on this screen I don't really feel that I'm creating anything communication, but it is of the utmost importance, and how to teach others to do that. I mean, I love working with children, and they're some of the most vibrant, creative souls I've ever met, and they're unscathed at the moment. And working through them, actually, I gain a lot of understanding of how to communicate generally through just my work with them. So continuing that in some way.
So communication, writing, and children, right? Those are the three components that were strong for you.
And I mean, there are lots of aspects to. I mean, when I was looking back in that meditation, you do 5 years. You did 5 year gaps, didn't you? And actually, it's really interesting because you come up with a multifaceted version of you. Because at 5, you're, a bubbly, sort of creative little girl who's singing all the time, and then at 10, you're a miniature little female adult who's delving into romance novels and writing poetry and whatever. So there's different aspects of that, and you're kind of trying to feed that into one stream.
That is an awesome thing to bring up. I'm really glad you brought that up, actually, because that underlines the fluidity of the self. I mean, that is totally central to this as well, which is like part of what we want to feel really enlisted with is the freedom and liberation to change up ourselves in the same way. When you look back and you see who you were when you were 5 and you're 10 and you're 15, how could we stay the same? Seeing the dramatic, unpredictable surprises of how a self can totally reinvent itself. I think one of the pitfalls that this program and this practice in the community could help turn on its head is the stasis that sets in. Developmentally, we all know that they say, you get to 18 or whatever it is, 20 or whatever, and your self solidifies, it concretizes, and you don't change again until the life-disrupting end-of-life developmental stages when you're maybe on your way out. It doesn't have to be that way. And I think that, I can't cite the studies, but the developmental studies that I know of just from reading the integral stuff and psychology and spirituality is that these practices and these kinds of undertaking are great disruptors to keep it fluid.
Yeah,
for sure.
And that fluidity is so frightening for so many people. I can vouch.
But you know what? That's why we need this micro community.
Right.
Because when you can create, if we get dozens or however many folks join us in this process, you can create a self-reinforcing, hermetically sealed new culture where that is the imperative. Not only is it discouraged, but it's the imperative. That's the prime directive of what we're going to be about here. And so people aren't going to look and you be like, what the hell are you doing? You know, like you're really stepping out, drawing outside the lines with your own frontal structure of your ego or your cerebral cortex or whatever. You're really like putting the spots in the wrong places. In this instance, it's the other way around. And so I think, to get back to one of the negative sides of functioning alone and being an insulated or isolated creative person, is that you don't have the positive reinforcement and backup forces to have your back when you have to go back to the office, or you got to go to the family reunion and people look at you like, what are you doing? Like, get a job, hold down an income, toe the line, and be a widget like everyone. You know, like this.
But what
can Go ahead.
What I think is so incredible is the possibility, you know, that what you were talking about, the abundance of possibilities that lie ahead. So in my particular case, you know, being in a job for 10 years, knowing exactly what I was doing for 10 years every single day of my life, and working with that as well, playing with that, and then the other side of that, and actually exploring. And the exploration process doesn't need to be the decision-making process either at all. It can just keep exploring until you're dead.
Exactly.
And that's okay too. I think it's the acceptance of that. I'm quickly learning that it's the acceptance of that, really. Sorry.
Totally.
I was just going to share something else about in relation to the dying exercise on exactly that point. Just that I was surprised when I sort of was coming out of my body at the end, looking down at how fine I felt with dying. Just still loads to do, but I don't want to feel like there's whilst there is always more to do creatively, and every, you know, it feels like a process, basically, kind of what you were saying, that it's ever changing, but it's a process, not necessarily that there's a thing and then I've got to get it out as if that's an end in itself. It's a ever continuing process that obviously only will stop if you give up or you die. But it's in that sense, it's just a process. So that was kind of all I wanted to share.
It's a process, and it's also, it's kind of getting back to what I was talking about with the learning guitar and writing 150 songs, and none of them are good, and it didn't matter at all, because the boon, the gift, the treasure was that intoxicating, enigmatic experience of watching something emerge from nothing over and over again, never knowing how it's going to come out, where it comes from, but yet knowing that somehow, magically, I am allowed into this realm and I'm given the keys to this thing, and it will dependably function in that way if we make ourselves available. And I think you're right, the to be hovering over your body. A lot of folks might feel that it's morbid to circle around death in this way, but I really think it comes back to a fundamental reframing. Do we actually know what that even means? Do we know what is, unseen and waiting for us within the death process? And everything is a death. We've died to the first hour of this program already and moved into the birth of the second one. Like every morning,
the internet literally died.
We literally killed the internet and resurrected it. But I loved what you said about having that feeling of peace, because there's nothing in me that's wanting to invoke or cultivate anxiety around death. I'm just saying that the broad spectrum of how it applies includes the fact that every morning that we wake up, there is something shifting and different about us. It includes the fact that our 5-year-old is gone, but we can still see and we still feel the inclusion, and our behavior and who we are is informed totally by that 5-year-old. It's transcended and included, as Wilbur would say. And so, even though this progression of births and deaths is transpiring, we include the sum total of the cosmos. I mean, as we all know, we're stars, man. We're just totally spit out from the furnace of those novas. Every single component in us came from the death of those stars. Look at how Bowie left this world. I mean, I'll never get over how beautiful that was. That stands as a completely incomprehensibly beautiful work of art to me, including the artwork itself literally, and also the whole way that he presenced what is really a transition. It's really, all of these are about transitions. It's about birth, death, but our transitioning from the place that we are now into the one that's coming down the pipeline, which is going to be birthing these great projects, whatever they may be. So really, it's about becoming master navigators of transitions.
You just mentioned Ken Wilber.
Yep.
And I know we've also got a little video clip from when you met with Ken. And we should say that with these clips, that part of the creation of the 6-month course, this is the kind of kickoff of, you're obviously delivering 6 core modules. We'll talk about those a bit later. But you've also been out interviewing some of your inspirations, I guess we could say.
Yeah.
And Tammy Simon, we had a little bit earlier. So maybe it's probably quite hard to summarize Ken Wilber in a couple of sentences. But just say a few words before we come to that video.
Well, concisely put, he's one of the greatest philosophers of the last century. I think that's just generally undeniable. But he's also an interesting cat because he's a popularizer and an integrator. And so he isn't just a philosopher. Part of what Ken does is he takes every existing system and methodology on the planet and he gathers them under one umbrella in one framework and illustrates how they relate to, support, and reinforce each other, what their distinct talents, offerings, and gifts are to the world, and what their shortcomings are. And in a nutshell, he's pulled together the sum total of human knowledge and cohered it into a digestible system that, hilarious as it may sound, you can apply in your own life immediately to help you unpack, augment, and amplify your own being and your own life and whatever it is your areas of passion are.
Beautiful.
That's Ken Wilber.
Beautiful. So we'll play that video now.
Well, in part, what Stu and I are here to discuss is the perennial question, something out of nothing. And if you think about it right now, and just sort of get away from your standard interaction with all of this as if it's just to be expected, and this is just here, and we don't really ask, where does it come from? But if you actually stop and think just a minute, get a little bit quiet, and think about the simple fact that something is happening. There's a mystery about why is something even occurring. I mean, this is really an astonishing fact the more you think about it. And it turns out having all sorts of profound repercussions because it reaches into so many different areas of our life, as we'll see as we continue to talk and look into the topic itself. So if you look at this sort of historically, and men and women, as they evolved, started to become more and more self-reflexive, more aware, more sophisticated in their questions, they would tend to notice that most things in the environment have some sort of cause. So this chair didn't just show up directly out of nothing. It was actually built by some various manufacturing process. There were several men and women involved in perhaps an assembly line, but putting it together and making it. So this had some cause to bring this here. And so you say, okay, well then what caused the people that caused this? And then we can look back into individuals' lives. We can look at the causal train that created the assembly line. We can look at the causes that created the men and women working on the assembly line. They had parents made love, that produced them. Well, then where did the parents come from? Well, they had causes going back to their parents, and on and on and on. And so it's common to say that everything that exists has some sort of reason, some sort of cause. But as you carry this back, what caused this, what caused that, what caused this, pretty soon you start to get back to something like the beginning, which is, well, what originally caused this? I mean, a theologian would typically say, well, God is the cause of all of this, because everything has to have a cause, and so God is the cause of all of this. But if everything has to have a cause, what caused God? And then that's just sort of an infinite regress. And yet, if you don't want to just throw over the question and say, okay, I give up, I don't know, and I don't care. I'm just going to live my life in dull ignorance of this fundamental issue. But if you start to kind of look at it, what some of the answers that have been given have tended to stand up, at least among people that still think philosophically and haven't just reduced their thought processes to scientific materialism. Even though, as we'll see, scientific materialism has a first cause, an answer for this. But the idea is that in this string of cause and effect and cause and effect and cause and effect, at some point, and however far past it goes, right now we put it around the Big Bang, but at some point there was a first cause. There was a cause that itself set everything in motion, but itself was not caused. And this is generally, by most of the great traditions around the world, meditative, contemplative traditions, this first cause is maintained to be things like absolute being, ultimate reality, pure Dharmakaya, absolute Godhead. It's simply the unmoved mover. It's the first cause. It's the cause that sets things in motion, but it's not itself caused. Itself is just pure spontaneity. Because if there was something that caused it, that would mean there was something outside of it, and therefore it's not absolute. So the absolute, the general response has been, it is just simply the end of the line, and it's where, since we say, well, every cause has to have a cause itself, and then that has a cause, and that has a cause. Those are all relative causes. At some point you just stop and say, okay, there's an absolute cause. Whether it's at the Big Bang, whether it's in some sort of theological, whether it's a Buddhist pure emptiness. But at some point, there's this creative, vast, empty thing, we can't really come up with words for it, that is a creative source of what's arising. And we'll talk a little bit about how that happens, because that turns out to be really interesting in terms of how we get this actual manifest universe.
All right, we're back.
Excellent. More bald guys. Bald guys on screen.
Is that basically the kind of the deal? If you're a male and you're a genius, you have to shave your head?
Well, that's what I'm trying. I'm hoping to appropriate that premise.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, we need to go to the barbers after this, right?
I'm a genius boxer. I stand around and...
Your mic's not plugged in.
My mic's not plugged in?
Oh, it is plugged in. Sorry. Can
you hear me okay?
You're plugged into the wrong one.
I'm plugged into... Oh.
Hang on a second. I'll do a link. Sorry, guys.
There goes the most
I think... So,
No.
that was the most profound thing. Moving on. No, so...
So yes, Ken, wonderful. We're speaking about bald men, and so, I mean that recapitulation of something from nothing that he just gave us actually through the last 5 minutes, I think, is one of the most amazing, beautiful, concise summaries, and really hits it on the head. His whole body of work is, 30 years and 15 or 20 books doing a much more elaborate, great scaffolding of what it is we're discussing. But there's a complementarity there, because I think he really works on a kind of academic, philosophical, more cerebral map-making side. And what we're up to here with Something from Nothing is a little bit more of a gut, emotional, internal, well-digging into our own source.
But one of the things that I think is so interesting is that the creative process and the ingredients that make up that creative process, whether it's academia, whether it's music, whether it's business, whether it's parenting, like the ingredients of that are the same.
Yeah.
Even if the medium is completely different.
Exactly, and that is really what's fascinating about it, and he talks about that as well. We filmed a lot of content with Ken. It's all going to be available. Interestingly, his work is probably the number one influence on my creative life, more so than any other songwriter, more so than filmmakers or other folks that are in mediums closer to me. When I read Sex, Ecology, Spirituality from him, it detonated and utterly altered my creative life permanently, and in a beautiful way. It cohered and articulated many things that had ruminated in me for a long time that I couldn't quite put expression to in an external form, but that I was feeling emotionally. So it really helped me make sense of my own internal world in a way. And it, to transition a bit, it also helped me make sense of my own discomfort. One of the things, we were speaking earlier about myths and busting some of the myths around creativity and old romantic notions that we can dispel with. And Ken speaks at length in our talk later on about the inverted nature of why we think artists are messed up or full of chaos, or why artists are often depicted to be dependent on altered states, drugs, alcohol, the whole romantic notion of like the rock and roll thing, or whatever you want to imagine it. Crazy painters, they all have their own variety of it. And Ken was saying that our culture, or our notion of artists, is that the artist is invoking the muse, or is mitigating the intensity of their own, like they need those drugs and alcohol in order to create. And so they create because they're sick. Like somehow their sickness is indispensable to the creative product that is going to come out on the other side. And he's pointing out that it's actually the other way around. And what happens is that the intensity of the creative process for a lot of these artists causes them to try to ground by finding these other points of contact, which in relation or in conjunction feel somehow to them to be like putting that third rail into place. And his approach and what he offers with a set of tools, and one of the ways it's been most useful in my life, has been introducing, first dispelling that myth, and then introducing what the positive alternatives are. Which, one of the things that we just did, that little meditation practice, is an example of that, but there's also all of these other contemplative practices and a menu of techniques and methodologies that we get into in depth in Something from Nothing. One of our core modules is state training. And so I think that I'd just like to say in appreciation for Ken's work that he has helped me re-mean my discomfort or anxiety or just the simple physical, somatic, emotional intensity of creating, see it for what it was, and then introduced a host of new technologies. Really, each of these things is a kind of interior technology that's available to us. And when I started to apply those tools more and more, it really changed who was driving the car. Like the unconscious material of whether it's the saturnalia of misbehaving with drugs and alcohol, or sex, or all of these other like major engines and drivers that are available to us as pathologies. Instead of them kind of steering me through my career path, it switched, flipped upside down, and they became more like employees or voices in the choir that I could conduct. They didn't vanish or disappear. But we are going to talk a little bit now about discomfort, and I think that that is one of the most interesting places, because that's one of the first things that makes us stop. Like, we've gone through this process so far of identifying this primordial lineage of something from nothing and claiming our place within it, and then through the practice dying, identifying that there's more to our story that we want to create and we can be the authors of it. So the question is, why haven't we done that at this point in our life? Up until now, why haven't we just seized the mantle and rushed forth? There's blocks, there's occlusions, there's hurdles, and this kind of discomfort is in that category, but it comes with a host of other ones: anxiety, anticipation of being judged, failure, letting go of the familiarity of the self we have now, which is really nice and comfortable and known to us, marching into the great enigmatic unknown. So there's this list of discomforts and occlusions and blocks, and that's kind of the next step in this conversation. We had another talk with Steve Beckett, who is one of my favorite people in the world and also one of the most amazing creators. He founded Warp Music, the Warp record label. He founded Warp Films, two of the most amazing artistic companies in the world. No exaggeration to say those two companies have a reputation that's almost unsurpassed and unexcelled, and they are loved and respected both by artists and people in the industry. They've done well commercially. Their artistic integrity doesn't come at the expense of commercial success. He has really struck a balance that's brilliant, and he's kind of universally loved. So it was a real get to get him. But on top of all that, he's an integral coach, which is a totally amazing curveball to kind of out of that whole thing. That's a fun story. I was on a spiritual retreat hanging out with someone, and they were like, my spiritual coach is Steve Beckett. And I said, that's funny, there's a guy named Steve Beckett who runs Warp Records and Warp Films. And they were like, yeah, that's my spiritual coach. And I was like, I don't think that's your spiritual coach. Steve Beckett, he's like a rock star, he's like a big, film guy. And they're like, no, that's my spiritual coach. We talk several times a week, and he's helped me through all my spiritual practice and coaching and development. And I was just like, those two things don't go together. That can't. Well, we made a bet and I lost, and it turns out that Steve Beckett was his spiritual coach. And so that's how I met Steve. He said, yeah, I know him, and I'll introduce you to. So we talked to Steve about something from nothing, and specifically in this clip, he describes discomfort and how to move through it.
Great. We'll play that clip now.
I think that one of the elements in that process that could be tricky for folks, or also used as an opportunity to bypass or avoid or delay this process, is that when you get into that hanged man, that Bardo realm, that pause where the discomfort has set in and we are waiting, and that period might be a day, it might be weeks or months as you described. How do you determine the difference between the discomfort of an emerging birth of something new in your life, or the discomfort of just avoiding or escaping from the this discomfort that might be really not wanting to do the thing that comes next? Yeah. There's also the avoidance in us that can be, on the one side, we might be waiting for that next great phase of our life. The other side of it, we might be afraid of it. We might be intimidated by it, and some of the discomfort might be not wanting to inhabit that. Yeah. Some people are waiting for it with hunger and fervor, and for me, I find it excruciating to sit in that waiting hold. But I know that other folks, and probably myself at different times in life, might feel the discomfort of like, I really don't want to be that thing that I know is coming. How do you know the difference between those varieties of discomfort, or is there even a way to know?
It's a great question. I think I don't think there's a way to know initially, because it's almost like you don't know till you've tried it out. So so I've tried loads of different things that haven't worked, or that just haven't been exciting for me. So for example, with the film company, we all said, similar thing, like when we were starting the film company, we said, hey, we've got all these directors, amazing directors, why don't we set up an ad agency? Because we can do these ads and they'll pay us tons of money, like £600,000 we've heard. Why don't we just do that? Yeah, it'll be great. So we all set off and do it. But then we actually go through the process, and then we're all sitting there on set with these great directors making adverts for sugary water that we're putting into kids' stomachs. And we were literally just sitting there going, what the hell are we doing? So there's the only way that we found out, and then we pulled out of it, just went, this isn't us, We didn't pull out, finished off that advert. We kept our word to that, but we just didn't continue doing an ad agency. So I think there's a number of ways. Firstly, I'm just more one of these people who's just like, try things out, prototype them, and that's the way you're going to find out. Secondly, don't assume that just because you think it's going to be difficult or uncomfortable, that's not the thing. For me, again, the things that have been the most uncomfortable thing, especially like public speaking and teaching, where I'm standing in front of a group, I used to be terrified of that. I literally used to be vomiting before going in front of a group of people, even saying my name. Never mind standing there for 5 days teaching to them, which is what I do now. But the point is then when I gradually started doing it more and more, it's like, oh my God, I love being here. I love being seen. This is a massive part of my life that's been completely missing. I've been in the shadows behind other people, but I've never been on stage. So suddenly, this is the integration and the developmental piece. Suddenly some piece that's not been online for me is online and integrated, and then the next thing comes in. So I think there's trying something out. For me now, I feel like I move more from here, so I can get a sense that now when I'm moving in an authentic way, it's at a slower pace, and it feels like I'm moving from here. Whereas it can still have speed, but I'm somehow moving, like paradoxically, slow motion and really quickly. So to me, it feels like because I've done it a few times, I've got that marker, so I can correlate between what feels like just more of a reactive movement and more of a real authentic movement. But if people haven't got that, if they're only just getting into this, I think it's just a question of firstly prototyping it, just try things, get the direct experience of doing it. This is either like, yes, this feels fantastic, there's energy coming from it, take the next step, or like, no, this feels like shit, I'm going to step back, get into the death zone and see what's coming next. I think that's one position. I think secondly, just get into relationship with people. Don't just talk to your friends who say everything you do is brilliant, but speak to people who have also got some kind of experience or success in the field that you're thinking of moving in. Just speak to them and say, look, I'm terrified or whatever it is, but I'm thinking of doing this. How does that feel to you? I can guarantee you, if it feels real to people and you've that person's giving you real feedback, they'll just be going, bring it on. They can see it in you and they'll pull it out of you. I'm going through the coordinates, that's upper left, lower left, and then there's a right-hand side, which you do the practical stuff of modeling, say if it's more of a business-orientated thing, how much is it going to cost me? What's coming in from what I'm going to do? Is there a market for it? Is it actually of a certain quality that people are going to be interested in? This is all those, it's not just has to come from your interiors, you can check with these other elements, I think.
So I think that pretty perfectly encaptures some of the kind of the struggle that goes on. And it's like, one of the things that kind of fascinates me as well is when when people are on a kind of spiritual path, as it were, and they've been trained to listen to their body and go with the flow and things be easy, and then they come up against struggle and discomfort, that often gets used as an excuse that, well, it's not in the flow and it's difficult, so it's not meant to be, and they pull away from that rather than dive through that.
Spot on. Like, I just love what Steve was sharing about vomiting and throwing up for all of those months and years. He knows in himself that he needs to become this figure who coaches and who leads these groups and helps people along their transformative path, but he's completely seized with introversion and a terrifying, disabling fear of being in front of people. That's his gig. Like, that's the discomfort that dude is facing of, like, I know I have to do this, work with people, be in front of groups, public speaking. It literally makes him puke his guts out every time he does it. And he keeps doing it and keeps going back. By the way, he doesn't need that gig. He's already started 2 successful companies and hit it out of the park. I can't tell you how much I love the fact that it's like at that point in his life was when he decided he needed to do the most uncomfortable thing that was magnetizing him.
Because something was birthing from nothing that needed to come forth.
Exactly, and I think that is what's really interesting about his describing how he verifies something. How he knows whether the path that he's going down is the right one creatively. And it's not whether or not there's discomfort or whether or not there's ecstasy, because really, actually, they come in equal measures oftentimes and they alternate. It's not all the dark discomfort. Sometimes it's totally euphoric to be doing whatever you're doing, but either could happen. And neither of them are the way that he confirms or denies that it's the right path for him. How he confirms or denies is the results. What is the feeling and the reverberation after that event has taken place? So it's not like, am I puking before I'm going to speak in front of people? That's not where he goes, that's how I know or not. It's not even when he's speaking in front of those people necessarily. It's the result. It's the empirical data, so to speak, that he pulls from the experience. And he says, unmistakably, he knew that speaking and being done with speaking and feeling what emerged from that, the something that came from that nothing and that void, was undeniable to him. He knew that's how his life had to go. And yet, knowing that and experiencing the post-coital glow, so to speak, of those events, did not alleviate or diminish his puking next time. Same thing, back to square one. Like, I think that is such an amazing encapsulation of how this process works when something really important is transpiring. And this is the difference, again, as he pointed out, between don't just make something from nothing, make something valuable from nothing. Make something really intense that is going to put you into an undeniable situation where you are stretching, growing, you're changing, and you're giving birth to that kind of significance. And so I think that, first of all, I'm just really inspired by that. And then second, I would love to hear from you guys here with us tonight, gentlemen and ladies. What are some of your blocks? Like, what are the obstacles and occlusions that up until now have stopped you or slowed you down? You know, could we make a little list going through the group of some of the greatest hits of obstacles?
Anyone want to go first?
Yeah, so for me, I think a lot, it's what you were saying earlier about being like an introverted type of person. So for me, I'm naturally quite quiet. I kind of like the small groups. But what I've been doing in the last 5 months is complete opposite to that. It's exhilarating, but it's terrifying as well. So it's like putting yourself out there. I've always had blocks about speaking up, being visible, and I'm doing all that now. But I was sort of thinking, I was going a bit crazy a few months ago, thinking, why am I doing this thing that I, like, all my whole life I've been terrified of? But as you said, you know, there was this thing of, like, deep within you, there's something that needs to come out. Mm-hmm. And it feels like bigger than you. So it's like now I'm just kind of trying to go with it, and it's brilliant, but it's scary, really scary.
Can I ask you what it feels like physically and emotionally when that creeps
like
up?
A bit like puking.
Yeah.
It's like to that extent. So I've always wanted to like write and sort of create like groups of people and things. And I did a speaking event in October, and my heart was pounding. I felt like physically like I was going through some sort of trauma. And I was thinking, why am I doing this? I put myself into this position. I felt great afterwards, thinking, wow, I did this thing. But then I went back to feeling like, shit, I never want to do that again. Ever. But now I'm sort of doing it again. So, but it's like, it's weird, because I was thinking, am I nuts, or is it something? But it feels like it's kind of bigger. You know, it's like this bigger thing that's sort of coming through me, and it's starting to make more sense now. But it's scary, but it's a real physical thing.
That's an interesting point you hit on too about am I nuts, because it's another thing that Steve talked about in that piece, which is if the situation that you're in is either, and it doesn't, not necessarily you personally, but maybe just at work or in your culture or whatever it is, if that situation is not necessarily totally healthy and integrated, if that situation is not necessarily serving your growth and transformation anymore, to step outside of something that's not totally healthy and vital can make you feel like you're the crazy one. You may be moving into a more profound integrated sanity, a deeper place, a whole new you. It's going to look nuts to everyone who has a consensus agreement to stay where they are, or whatever that previous agreement or environment was. Does that partly feel accurate for you?
Yeah, it does, and it's also how it's how you think people perceive you. So it's like you've got this identity. So I've always had this identity. You know, I used to work as a lawyer. That was what I used to do. It was very kind of rigid. And then when I came out of that and I'm doing all these kind of crazy things to sort of other people, it's this fear of like, God, how are people seeing me now? Because my identity is so different to maybe it was even a year ago. This time last year, I wasn't doing any of the things I'm doing now. Yeah. So that's like a big thing in itself.
Awesome. So that's number 2 on the puking chart right there so far. We're 2 for 2 on the queasiness.
I also, if you don't mind, I want to jump in as well. One of the things that Marie's been doing is creating videos and putting them out on Facebook and YouTube and that kind of thing. And it made me think that when I first started out doing my previous business, doing video blogging, like some of the videos are so bad. They're just so bad. And so people sometimes say to me, well, God, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't start. I say, go and look at, because I haven't taken it off YouTube in principle, because I feel like it's important. I was saying to you, I feel like it's important that people see how bad you can start out. And I'm not saying I'm great now, but I've got better at it, you know? And there's something about that kind of evolution and that just starting where you are that's so important. If you don't go through that pain, you never get better. You don't get the chance. In fact, we also, while Stuart's been in London, did a couple of gigs, and a friend of mine was supporting Stuart and his son, who's 12 years old. If you don't mind, just say a few words about that. Absolutely. It's a great example of just getting started.
It's such a great example. So I did a couple of shows in London, and the gentleman who was opening the shows, his son is 12 years old and is a comedian. He's 12 years old and he's a comedian. I mean, as soon as we heard that, we were like, what? Hold on, stop. Now, your son's 12. Yeah, he goes around, does all of these gigs in comedy clubs. He's been at it for a long time and he's really, really into it. He knows this is his thing. And we couldn't get over. We're just like, he has to come and open the show. He's got to come and do a set. We've got to see this happen. So sure enough, his name is Jasper. What's his last name?
Jasper Ryan. His dad's Ryan Spielman.
Jasper Ryan. Not Jasper Spielman?
No. Remember Mum and Dad are both called Ryan? So they called the kids,
Jasper Ryan. He's 12. We said, can you bring him? Yep, they arrange it. He comes in. I mean, he's honestly, I don't know, he's like this tall and comes in and totally apparently shy. Like I said hello and introduced myself. No interaction. Didn't even say hello. Didn't acknowledge that. But you know, we all gather in the room, sit down, and he walks on stage. And the moment that microphone hits his hand, he's just like, "So, let me tell you what it's just like immediately, physically, emotionally comfortable in his body, totally in command of the room, pacing the stage, you know." Acting out all of these characters and sketches and stuff, and it was one of the most inspiring things I've seen in so long. Because, first of all, just to do stand-up is one of the most, tough ways to be laid bare. There's nothing to depend upon other than your nakedness in that room and that microphone and your wit. For any age, people people don't get over that. When you're 70, 50, that is the quintessential fundamental fear of public speaking, but he totally had the self-possessed command of it, and you could tell that he was right. This was his thing. I mean, he was so clearly, naturally, completely himself in that. And I don't know what his emotional state is before he goes on or whatever, but I know that I've been performing for you know, I'm 45 years old. It's been since I was 16, and I still feel the same way I did when I was 16. And it doesn't matter if I'm playing in front of 2,000 people or 2, and sometimes 2 is harder because it's that close and personal. And I totally relate to the puking thing. I totally relate to the physical. For me, gradually over decades, mind has morphed into this kind of generalized weird, like I took laughing gas and ate bad food or something before I go on. Like it's just this generalized tingling anxiety expectation that also has a little twinge of ecstasy to it. But they all jumbled together. It never goes away. And for so many years, I would do a huge show and think like, okay, things will be okay now because I've done this huge thing. So obviously I won't feel like a lunatic when I walk in front of 20 people next time in a club. And sure enough, totally feel it, never disappears and vanishes. And gradually over time, I felt like we're just gonna have to be friends. I'm totally gonna have to make friends with this situation and with this feeling. And so if I could just jump from that kind of discomfort that we're talking about, one of the things, if you could in your head right now here and everyone at home, make a little list, just 2 or 3 in your mind right now of the things you feel and the things you encounter that stop you. Like, what are the things that give you pause? And try to give them, if you can, a bit of a personality. Give them a name. Maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's fear of embarrassment, maybe it's fear of judgment or failure. But think in your head, in particular, this lineage of something from nothing, your place in it, this project and thing that you want to bring into the world, why it hasn't happened yet, and who the 2 or 3 biggest culprits are in your own self that are stopping you up until this point. So just take 30 seconds in your mind and formulate that little list. So from that little list, what I think is, well, first of all, I'd like to ask, if maybe Katrin, we haven't heard from yet, could we hear what yours are?
Well, is this on?
Yeah.
I don't have any creative projects going on right now, and yeah, it just feels awful. I'm just totally defined by my boring office job that I actually like and am good at, but that's not me. It's not who I am. But I know when I've had ideas for creative projects that have not happened. And I'll start out just really enthusiastic about it and say, hey, I've got this great idea. I want to make this thing, and I'm going to take this thing that I love and this totally unrelated thing that I also love and put them together, and it's going to be so cool and it's going to be so great. And I'm trying to tell people about this, and I'm very excited about it. And the reaction I get from others is, oh, and just totally takes the wind out of everything, and I start thinking, well, obviously, this is not something that the world wants. I'm the only person who sees any value in this thing that doesn't exist yet. Mm-hmm. So why should I even bother? And that's kind of where I am now, and also that that I am spending so much time on my day job that I have no time or energy to do much mm-hmm. else.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So, first of all, you do have episodes and occasions where these creative inspirations come to you.
Oh, absolutely.
They punctuate your life. That's kind of a regular occurrence. Mm-hmm. But these 2 things that you just described, one of them which is hitting that wall of deadness, kind of the Zombieville of how the world doesn't respond, doesn't mm-hmm. react. And when you throw that pitch out there, it doesn't reverberate back, right? Just kind of right. vanishes absorbed into that. And the other one is time and availability of energy and kind of
just the time and resources and energy to do anything.
Yep. First of all, what you just described with putting that out there and getting nothing back really reminds me of this description from E.J. Gold. Has anyone ever heard of E.J. Gold? He's a really, really interesting artist. I mean, first of all, he wrote a series of books called Life in the Labyrinth, and it's basically about navigating the manifest corporeal world as a spiritual essence. And he describes all of the cosmos as a labyrinth, and he provides and administers technologies and tools, including lots of occult and esoteric ones, for the navigator, for the voyager, actually is the word that he uses, through the labyrinth. And I highly, highly recommend, in particular, Life in the Labyrinth is one of the books that changed my life. But another interesting one that he wrote was called The American Book of the Dead. And that book circles back to what we were doing earlier. The American Book of the Dead is a Western version of all of the Eastern books of the dead, Tibetan Book of the Dead, Coptic Book of the Dead, but any book of the dead that was a technology which enlisted the voyager at the point of death with the tools and resources to know how to navigate the realms in between incarnations. So when you physically excarnate, kind of like what we're doing our little practice, instead of climbing back into your body, if you had to find your way into the next lifetime, these books are a map. And they're very detailed, and they're actually very functionally useful, in my opinion. But what reminded me of all of this and what you were saying, Katrin, was that E.J. Gold describes the essential self, the soul waking up and being vitalized with this exuberant creative force, this spiritual awakening, and it moves into the bird's eye view of the planet Earth. And it observes the entirety of human history, all the living souls, all the souls that has passed, apprehends it all, and it is immediately hit with this massive gravity of loss and hopelessness, because the torpor of the planet is what comes back to it. The planet is not awake, and it is teeming with activity and teeming with biological dynamism, but the awakening has not happened yet for the collective. And so it's very much what you were just describing. What E.J. Gold says is that one of the things you're going to feel when you first have this euphoric new placement in your deeper self, your higher self, your voyager, is you're going to encounter the dead zombie mass of humanity, and it's going to break your fucking heart. And it does. And what you're describing is something that I have experienced many times, and I think anyone with a truly passionate, deep care for humanity and for other people and for the miracle of surprise, that's a heartbreaking thing. But there's two other things that come to mind for me from that, is that number one, clearly the world really wants it badly, actually, but it's distinctly located it in you. It's very specific. Now there's some downsides to that. You don't have the masses charging behind you and lifting you up to body surf over all of this humanity. Nonetheless, their positive flip side of it is that is very personal. You feel it, it's unmistakable. Now I think the question from that point forward is there actually no one in the world, or have you just not contacted them yet? Are they sitting in this room with you? Are they at home watching on the live stream? Are they existing in a parallel feeling of isolation and insulation in other parts of the world? Is there a way to find them? Those concordances, and also in my experience, it only takes one. It takes one other person to feel and reverberate with what it is that you're saying for you to think like, okay, I'm not actually batshit crazy. Okay, this is actually, and I can guarantee you 100%, there's one of us in this room is already that person, probably all of us. So that brings us back to why it's important to have this tribe, why it's important to have this embassy, this hermetically sealed, so to speak, community tribe that will support each other and create a microcosm that can become exuberant and thriving and exist outside of the other stuff that would have otherwise made that deaden. On the other thing I just want to touch on quickly is the time and resources. You didn't say money, but you were more like time with work and energy, right?
Well, money is definitely part of it, yes, but also time and just supplies and a place to work and everything else. But money could buy all those things.
It could also make them worse. Yeah. I mean, that is really the kind of flip side of this whole thing, is it could make them worse. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I just want to touch on with that is that the conditions, Steve talked about this in his response, and I have felt it through my life, and I think actually Ken and Tammy brought it up as well, but the conditions are never right. They're never going to be right. There will never be the right conditions. The conditions will range from sucking and being totally adverse to being moderately workable, and they will tend to slide between. And if they do pop into ideal, something like what happened here today will happen inevitably, which is just the wink from the mystery, which is I have to kick you somewhere. It is the strengthening adversity that you need to push against. And so it's actually one of the things that we want to work on in the modules with Something from Nothing, is that we have the opportunity to befriend the less than ideal, difficult situation. The conditions will never be right. There's a story that I want to share on this note, which is one of the greatest gigs that I ever got in my life. This is the gig you wait for decades, that you dream about. They called me and they were like, "Hey, would you come and perform with Jim Carrey in front of thousands of people in LA?" And I was just like, "Oh my God, yes, it's totally." That's the gig. That's the gig that in your head you think I've been going for so long, it's finally happened. I got the call, I got that. And so we went to LA, and I was supposed to do music, and he was going to do comedy, and they were like, "You'll open up for Jim." And so we get to the theater, and it's months of expectation. I'm telling everyone, I'm gigging with Jim Carrey. It's going to be amazing. Get ready, man. Shit's about to change, blah, blah, blah. Right, so I'm just building it up in my own emotional body, and I'm sharing it with everyone on our team and everything. And we all just engineered this fantasy of knotted delusion around this event. And the event approaches, and we get to the event that night, and I walk into the theater, and it's nuts. Thousands of people, massive theater. There's just dozens and dozens of employees and runners everywhere. I have my own private assistant who finds me at the door, and I'm just holy shit, this is rock star, man. Personal assistant takes me in. I'm like, "Okay, so when's sound check?" And she's like, "We're going to sound check you in 30 minutes. Awesome. I'm pacing backstage. The evening's going on. 30 minutes comes. No one's there. I track down my assistant. She comes back and she's like, "We're going to sound check you in 30 minutes. Don't worry. Have something from the buffet." So I eat some food. I feel queasy.
You actually ate some food? I didn't know you ate.
I put it near my mouth. And then another 15 minutes. I'm like, the sound check. I think I'm actually supposed to go on in 30 minutes or so. And she's like, "Yeah, we're going to sound check you in 15 minutes." You see where this is going. I'm slowly being migrated toward the back of the building. I'm nearing the backstage area. There's 100 people backstage. I passed 4 or 5 celebrities waiting in the wings of people. Holy shit, that's that guy. Holy shit, it's her. And I'm like, okay. And as I get backstage, I notice that it's just absolute chaos. There are many people employed and no one in charge. No one has a pulse or an organizational control of what's happening. My 15-minute marks come, and she comes back and she's like, "We're going to sound check you in 5 minutes, okay?" The show is already happening. She's like, "Don't worry, we're going to pull the curtain. Behind the curtain, we're going to set everything. We'll sound check you behind the curtain, then the curtain will open up and it'll be perfectly fine. You're going to get a sound check." Really? Okay, I'm still opening for Jim. Actually, Jim Carrey comes walking up the back swing. She's like, "Actually, Jim's going to go on now. You're going to follow Jim." So Jim Carrey walks out on stage, and it's just "Oh, the Messiah is here," and the whole theater. This is why everyone's there. The whole place is there to see Jim Carrey, obviously. Right? So he does his thing. It's actually very depressing. That evening, Jim Carrey's in a funk. And he has chosen this as a venue to work through some cathartic emotional material around women It's not really comedy. It's more like a therapy session with 3,000 people. The whole room at the end of it is going, huh, that's not what I expected when this was going to happen. And he walks off the stage and they're like, you're on! No sound check, of course. No sound check. I walk out on stage, the curtain parts, plug in my guitar, I step up to the microphone, there's 3,000 people, and I strum the guitar and I say hello into the microphone, and there's nothing. There's no guitar signal and there's no microphone. It's just me on a stage after Jim Carrey's depressing spiral into darkness with no sound and signal. And the whole room is just staring at me. And that moment was the quintessence of the conditions. Like, that's the trade-off. Do you want to do a gig with Jim Carrey? Okay. You'll do it with no amplification and no vocal mic. There will not be sound transmitted, but you will be sharing a stage with Jim. Those are the conditions. And no matter how hard I try to milk the conditions, like I really need that sound check, I really got to, we're not, like I'm not in control of anything. I don't control any of the stuff that is the context that I'm functioning in, except my own physical body and that little wooden box with strings that was 100 feet away from the first row of the folks. And so there's like only two options at that moment. It's like either I can try to have fun with this and participate, because we all know shit just detonated, or I can freak out and I can be traumatized for the rest of my life, or maybe both. That's kind of your third option. So I just started yelling things into the audience, and of course, everyone there is so full of anxiety. That's just immediately on my side. I threw out one or two jokes, the room starts laughing, people are scurrying around and trying to fix things, and by the time a minute or two of jokes and banter with the front rows had gone, like they were totally on my side. The PA came back on, and then I did the song, and actually what ended up happening is that I would have been the most forgettable thing in those people's entire evening, and this was the only thing that maybe created a little memory for them that I got to be a part of. And it was, I never would have asked for that or wanted it or engineered, but it's all about those conditions. It's totally realizing like, I'm either going to make something and the conditions are going to suck and I don't know how it's going to come out and I won't be able to control the circumstances, or I just won't make anything. And the other thing about that is that no one gives a shit what it was like for us to make anything. Like generally, 99% of the time, when I go to a museum and I stand in front of a Kandinsky, I don't sit there and go, I wonder if he was having financial trouble while he was painting this thing. I wonder if the heat was kind of on and off, and maybe they didn't have, the asshole relatives were visiting, and like people didn't approve of this painting and didn't really think it was revolutionary. Infinite number of things that probably, very likely, were actually the conditions that Kandinsky painted in, but none of it shows up when I'm in front of that canvas. And I think for your project or for whatever it is, if it's possible to reframe those conditions and befriend them in a new way, and to reorient your relationship to that wall of dead zombiness, that inert wall that you encounter, to reframe those things, could mean that your project does come to life, that one or two or however many of those projects comes into being. People will encounter them. Maybe it's one, maybe it's two, maybe it's 50,000, but it will impact them, and they won't have any knowledge of that other stuff. And I think that's the loyalty question. If we're really loyal to that end point, then the rest of the stuff is worth going through. Yeah, Kingsley?
Yeah, just actually, I had a couple of things to share if I've got a minute. On this same note, this is perhaps obvious, but it's just, for me anyways, it was a very relevant thing that me and my business partner realized in the last couple of years. But I would actually say that for us, constraints are inspiration. Whether that be time or money or whatever else, we found that if you take away those things, at least in our case, the creativity was shit. Basically, we would just, if we had time to work on our art, then we would just work on the details and just basically go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the detail and just totally lose perspective. And really that's like a potentially infinite thing. You can just keep doing that forever. So what took us out of that was basically to say, well, do we really want to be doing this forever? Like, you know, keep exploring this thing and never actually publish finish anything? Like, no. So, well, what's the constraint? Like, well, time. We don't want to spend more than a year on this. But why? Well, I don't know. So then we were like, well, we've got money. So technically, so it really took us basically saying, right, we've got to quit our jobs and just take the plunge, because then it's like do or die. And we don't have a choice anymore. So, and then that was like the first step towards us basically actually getting somewhere. It was just this kind of like, success or death.
That's a great, awesome point, and I totally agree. And I think having those constraints and knowing those limits, and even though they can be really intense and negative, like it is not exaggerating to say that truly most people do get home at 7 and they have to work to have food and shelter over the head. Those are the conditions, and they're not going to change. The project is not going to alter those sets of conditions and constraints. However, is there wiggle room within those sets of constraints in order to still bring this vision to life? Is there still a way within those sets of parameters? And sometimes when we unknow and give ourselves a kind of novel amnesia, and we forget what those telling ourselves what those constraints mean, what they are, and what their rules are and boundaries, if we re-know them from a new place, just part of what I want to jump into now, then a new possibility for your project still to come to life, and those shitty conditions can pop forward, and those can be your allies even. And so let's pop into this, if you're cool with moving into the voice dialogue thing quickly, which is the reason I asked for a few of the lists of those blocks, like the couple that you shared with us, is that in the 6-month process of Something from Nothing, one of the techniques that we use is a kind of voice dialogue or perspective taking. And so number one step in this process would be to just make that little list of 1 or 2 things and to try to personify them to an extent. So we'll call them, the inert, the zombie external, the zombie world out there maybe for you. Or for me, it might be like simple anxiety about not attaining my highest potential. Like when I go out to perform, I feel anxiety that I'm not going to do it as good as I could, and that the emotional thing that could happen for me and the people in the room might not happen because I feel this anxiety and I'm nervous every time I go to perform. So for instance, take your favorite one of whatever your blocks is, personify it, and I'll go through this process with mine, and you can superimpose yours on top of what stages are. So number one for me, I would identify as stage fright, let's say. And I can begin, this is stage 1, by looking at stage fright as an objective entity in the world. There's all these different ways that I can examine and walk around stage fright. The number one, first place that I can begin with is its location within my emotional and psychological bodies. And to see that this stage fright and this anxiety comes into my psyche and into my emotion as an undercutting voice of doubt. It tells me that not only could something go wrong, but that probably it's going to, because I have made mistakes before, because we all know that it's never, I've never outgrown this. I'm still full of stage fright. Why? I'm a fraud. We know I'm a fraud because professional performers who've done over 1,000 shows don't sit backstage with butterflies in their gut and feeling like they want to run away. That is what, adolescent, terrified little amateurs do. That's not a professional. So that's what that voice is saying to me in my psyche. That's location 1 in me walking around this objective facet. Location 2 is, so location 1 is invisible. It's that invisible voice and presence. Location 2 is still in my body, but it's physical. If you wanted to hook me up to all kinds of electrodes and measurements, you could physically measure the alteration in my heart rate. You could measure the muscle tension. You could watch my brain waves go into a different measurable state. Every aspect of my physical body is betraying the fact that I'm full of anxiety. Number 3 would be that my physical, emotional resonation of this anxiety is reverberating in the room that I'm in. Every time I walk onto stage and I feel anxiety, the fact is we're animals, and just like wolves or squirrels or whatever, people know. They don't have to think about it or talk about it. They feel it in the room immediately, and the performer is the one who's supposed to be the tuning fork, which goes back into my first station, which is telling me, guess what else? You're fucking it up for everyone else in the room right now. Way to go. You're spreading anxiety among people who didn't even have it. They came to have a good time tonight. And so it shows up in their invisible realm. And then the 4th location in this walk around of my anxiety in stage 1 is that interior ripple that went from my invisible realm into my physical visible realm into their invisible realm now shows up in their physical realm as well. And if you wanted to study the biology, physiology of everybody in that room, I have impacted them, they've impacted me, and a kind of feedback loop starts to happen between the performer and the audience, and we all get knotted up. So this is stage 1 of me examining my block. I see it objectively, and I walk around it as an object in my awareness, sort of like a jewel that you can hold up to the light, and depending on how you position it, it will refract different wavelengths, show you different aspects of it, but it's that object. So this is the objective study. So number 2 in this process is for you to enter into the dialogue. You will talk to the object. And you're no longer going to see it necessarily as an inanimate thing that you can hold up and examine as an object, but it's going to have an interiority to it, and you're going to speak to that interiority, just like you would to a person in the room. So for instance, for myself, I finished that step 1, and I'm going to move it over here, and like literally, if I were doing this in a room at home, I would set up 2 chairs, and I would speak to the presence of anxiety as it was sitting in this other side of this chair. And then I would begin to describe what I really don't appreciate about anxiety. Number 1, I'm a 45-year-old man, and I can't believe I'm still dealing with your shit. It's you. You are still in my life after I have done every conceivable thing that I can think of. I've changed my diet, I exercise, I meditate. I'm a 15-year Zen practitioner. It's totally embarrassing that I'm still struggling with anxiety. Obviously, meditation doesn't work, or it doesn't work the way it's supposed to. You are inhibiting all the fun that I want to have in life. I want to go out on stage and feel an explosion of love, and every time I walk up to that threshold, you are literally right on my heels, standing at the edge of the stage telling me don't. Why the fuck are you still telling me to not do this thing that I know is the reason I'm on earth? This is why I exist. Why do you have to be a part of the picture? It's totally poisonous, and you are a piece of turd who is literally wrecking the fun on the planet for me and everyone else.
Don't hold back, Stu.
Yes. So that needs to be the nature of the emotional honesty. It has to actually feel like something you give a crap about, and if it doesn't, it's not the right shadow thing for you to work on. It's not the right block for you to work on. If it doesn't have that level of charge for you, keep looking, because the charge is the verification that this is something that actually matters. Now, usually how this would go down as well is I would write all of this out. It helps to be in a stream of consciousness. You could record it on video. Don't just do it in your head. Don't just sit there and imagine there's something across there and you're thinking, say it. You need to physically pull the feeling out of your muscles and into your body. That happens through speech, that happens through writing. It doesn't happen through sitting in silence and making up an imaginary scenario. It's not a pretend friend. So Normally this would take me 15 or 20 minutes. We're going to condense it down so we can just get a snapshot of the process. I fully complete that when I feel the sense of closure physically and emotionally for myself. This is something that's in your belly and your chest and your throat. And when that part of you feels satisfied and you've said your piece and you know anxiety has heard you, then you stop. And you would conduct a brief meditation in between these, kind of like a clearing of the palate, similar to you do the breath exercise we did earlier in this course. After a minute or two of that, then I would physically get up and walk to the other chair and sit down in the chair. So let's imagine now I just flipped that and I have walked over here and I sit in this chair and I am now going to inhabit and be anxiety. This is step 3. So now I become anxiety, and it's equally important that I speak with total authenticity. This is not the version of anxiety that Stuart Davis would like to have. This is the anxiety itself allowed to speak from its true voice. And the first thing that I would say if I was anxiety and speaking to myself is I would say, like, I'm the only one actually looking out for you. I'm the only one who has the guts and the balls to tell you that you don't have your shit together. No one else in your life who says they love you and they care about you and they're going to help you transform, your Zen teacher, your wife, your kids, your friends, your fans, no one loves you enough to tell you the actual truth, which is you don't have your shit together. And if you're not familiar and acquainted immediately with how you have these shortcomings, blind spots, not only will shit fall apart, but it will fall apart 10 times worse than if I wasn't standing here. I'm the only one who's been with you through this entire process, and every time you walk out to perform, I am the awareness that puts your hand on the places that could trip you up, undermine you, and if you don't know your blind spots and your shortcomings, then they're going to take control of everything, and you're going to look like twice the idiot, and you're going to have half the show. Furthermore, your ego is so strong and is so loud and obnoxious that I'm the only immune system that's around for you not to become an insufferable asshole that no one wants to come and see in the first place. Have you any humility? No, not other than me. I am the humility in your life. I'm the actual point where you can feel vulnerable, that you can feel the vulnerability and the weaknesses that every person on the planet is struggling with, all throughout this room, all over the world. And if I wasn't there making you remember and making you feel what an open wound feels like, you would have no heart, no feeling, and nothing to share with anybody that actually really mattered. You would just go out there and show off. That's what you do. In fact, that's what you do every time you even get away from me for a little bit, is just start showing off. And that doesn't make any difference to anybody. You unfairly describe me in pejorative terms. Just because you feel things physically and emotionally that you don't want to, you have to project all of this made up crap that you think is pathological, that's actually one of the most tender, important parts of yourself trying to keep you real throughout your whole life. That's what I'm actually doing, and I really don't appreciate the way that you spin everything that I do into some kind of victim, like you're a victim. You're not a victim. You're barely a person. I'm trying to help you become a person. So that would go on again for however long it takes. A few days. Actually, a lifetime. Like this, truly, this process, what you find. So anyway, that's stage 3. To put it into a conclusion, it's stage 1, walk around it objectively from multiple perspectives. Stage 2, speak to it with full emotion and genuine transparency. Stage 3, speak as it. And then a stage 4 would be kind of the integration of all of those into a new emotional relationship with those stations. But it does go on forever, because the truth is that positive or negative, anything that's strong or powerful in my life, this dialogue technique and this capacity to actually take perspectives is one of the most fundamental things that I use as a writer of songs, stories, and all of that, but also the central tool to changing my shadow and changing the blocks and the occlusions that we were just talking about that keep me from sharing my gift, creating the things that are important to me. This process allows me to loosen those knots and get into a new relationship. And what generally happens over time is that our adversaries within ourselves that are antagonizing us and blocking us and stopping us, if we do this with them, they can be enlisted as allies, and they can be enlisted as employees instead of dictators.
And we should say in the 6-month process, there's an entire module where you go into this and teach this in a lot more detail.
Yep, it's a whole module on its own, which is shadow work, and this is one of the central tools that is used within that. In fact, I'm just remembering that we have one more video. It's just a straight up comedic video, but it's a light illustration of, people may or may not have seen some of my videos online or whatever, but I literally enact this through sketches. At first I did it for fun, and then I found out that actually it was a really useful way for me to unpack the conversations within myself and to externalize the perspectives within me into characters and allow them to fight it out in a therapeutic battle. Usually there's 3 of me, but in this sketch there's 2, and this is one of those.
You struggled to fit 3 of you in the bath.
I couldn't fit 3 of me in the bathtub, that's right. I'm naked in this sketch, fair warning.
Yeah.
Both of me are naked in this sketch. I'm not saying this chick had a big bush, but when I tried to go down on her, I startled a quail. I never asked. A rain boner only comes out after golden showers. I never asked. You know what? I never asked to be your mentor. You're nobody's mentor. I may be the best thing that never helps you. It's called a paradox. Do not help. 2 docs paired into non-duality. The scissors that cuts through the fabric of illusion. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Fucking put that in your bathroom, soak in it. I'd really prefer if we just sat in silence. You don't gotta get your foot out of my ass. I'm gonna tell you a story, okay? I'd prefer if you didn't. You ever hear the parable about the guy who got a free horse? No, okay? Best horse in the world waltzes into his corral one day. And the villagers are all like, "Oh, you're so lucky. You got a free horse. That's awesome." He goes, "You never know." All right? Very next thing that happens, his horse runs away. The whole village goes, "That sucks, dude. Fuck." He goes, "You never know." The horse comes back pretty quick. Everyone's like, "Your horse is back. That's so fucking awesome." Guy goes, "Okay, I don't fucking know." One day he's out doing chores. He catches his girlfriend under the horse. The village goes, "Fuck." Yeah. "Ouch. That stings, brother." He goes, "Never know." She announces, "I'm pregs." The village goes, "Nice. Children are miracles." He's like, "I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know." Okay. He gets syphilis from the horse or the girl or both. The village says, "God, that is, oh, ouch." He goes, "Hey, village, 3 syllables, bitches. Never know. I don't know." Yeah, well, his fucking girlfriend gives birth to a unicorn, right? And the villagers are all like, "That's a mysteriously beautiful creature with magical powers." To which he retorts, "I withhold interpretation." Boom! Fucking in their face. You have to swear so much. He's at the point of all places, motherfucker.
That doesn't make any
Since
sense.
this unicorn, though, is part human, it goes berserk. Okay? Goes on the worst killing spree in history. Village is like, it's horrible, we're being eaten. And he's like, never fucking know. I do not know. I am not the one who knows. I withhold my fucking knowing. I'm the cloud of unknowing, and I'm ever fucking flowing.
It's irrational.
Yeah, but the guy doesn't see the carnage because he's blind from the syphilis. And the disembodied souls of the villagers hover above him and go, you're fucking lucky that you're not seeing what's going on down there. He's like, never know.
That's not a parable. There's no moral to that story.
When the unicorn tries to kill him by spearing him in his syphilitic eye with its magic horn, it inadvertently cures his venereal disease, restoring his sight. To which he responds,
Is there a point?
You never fucking know! What is the point? I'm your unicorn!
So, is there anything else you want to say on this before we come to some questions from the audience?
I don't think so.
Okay. So it'd be good to hear from you guys a little bit about, especially the kind of, I think, Stu's demonstration around voice dialogue. I certainly was sitting there going, I can resonate with that. So yeah, it'd be good to hear a bit from you guys. And also, just while you guys are getting questions, people at home, just a reminder that you can post questions below this video on the Conscious 2 website, and in about 10 minutes or so, we'll put some of those questions to Stuart. So please do submit comments, questions now, and yeah, we'll come to those in a little bit.
Yeah.
I can go if you want.
Got to hold the mic though. You got to talk right into the mic. Whoever's first.
So for me, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I relate to that a lot as well, but it doesn't, due to the nature of what I do, it doesn't materialize itself as like anxiety or vomiting or anything like that. It's much more passive, because I don't have to perform my art in front of anyone. If I want, I don't actually have to show it to anyone ever. And I think that's my problem really. And the thing is I'm not really plagued by insecurity. If anything, it's actually the other way around. I have a lot of ego, and I think that's probably my that duality, I think, is probably with my ego. And I think what I've got to do is learn to just learn to let go and detach myself from what I do, and realize that it's not the best thing ever and it's nowhere near as good as what I imagine it to be, because, well, I'm only ever going to imagine it as the best thing ever, and really until it comes out of my head and into the real world, it's not worth anything. And then usually once that happens, it doesn't resemble what I imagined at all. Because of all the constraints that come with doing something like that. And but so sometimes it's nicer to like hold on to this idea because it's perfect, and you're just like, man, it's the best idea ever. I'm so awesome, And then you make it, and you're like, that's not it, But I think that's a part of it, is just realizing that I'm not as awesome in the best way. That sort of sounds negative, but just I'm not as awesome or it's not even that actually, because what happens is equally awesome. I would say, actually, the act of publishing,
It becomes real. It's like you said. It's
not, Mike.
I was just going to say, it becomes real. Like you say, it's not. You can be as awesome as you like in your mind, but unless it's real, then
it doesn't really have much value, if any, or at least not to you. So, but so again, it's not anxiety. It's sort of more like preventative, of that actually ever happening, really. So that's why I say it's passive. It stops me if I am feeling at all conflicted with what I'm doing. I have the opposite extreme situation of you, in the sense that I only work on my art these days, and it's my life basically, and so that's very stressful because if that's not going well, I'm not going well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have anything to fall back to. This is it. I'm defined by my art and my profession, and it's really empowering and really, really terrifying. But again, so what happens basically if it's not going well is I just will basically procrastinate. Just prevent myself from externalizing.
Keep it behind the curtain.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think it's a really important point, and it highlights nicely how various and divergent and unique everyone's, whatever that thing is, it's unique and distinct each time in each person. And it could be what you're describing, want to hold it back behind the curtain or hoard it, or savor it and not expose it to the risk of falsification, verification, or praise or whatever. Also, another risk with that is that maybe you see perfection, and what if you create perfection and the rest of the world thinks it's turds? That can happen as well. Every variety of that can happen, but what you're describing is one modality of it. My illustration with anxiety is another, and I bet if we go through the room, we'll find each person with their own version of that. Mm-hmm. And what's cool is that voice dialogue still works with any possible version of it.
Yeah, completely. So,
anyone else? Yes, Isabel.
Sorry.
We have talked about kind of like stress and not vomiting, so sweat's another form, right?
There's lots of things just coming out and being purged here. No, I was going to say about the dialogue aspect, because for you, it just the way that you brought it across, which was incredible, very expressive, and in some ways acting out. Being the actor. And I've never really tapped into the actress in me to be able to sit down and be with that anxiety, because in my case it's definitely anxiety, excruciating deep fear of not putting out well, and I found it difficult to talk. I was trying to imagine what it would sound like with my chair, and then swapping seats and things. And I'm not sure I can actually get my head around that. It's an interesting. I personally I work with my body, like somatic experiences, rather than talking out loud.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting take. I work with yoga, and actually because I'm very obviously extroverted, usually I come back in and I go into solitude, pure solitude, and that can then swing the other way. So I'm trying to find the balance actually in kind of external, internal communications to deal with that.
That's really interesting. I think you kind of have a head start though, actually, because if you're working with somatic and body-based processes is how you're integrating your emotional experience, I think that's actually a head start, because it's deceptive to think this is merely or even primarily a verbal practice. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are words, but when you're doing this at home, even get up, walk around, move the energy, make sure you have an actual point of contact could be a stick in the room or whatever it is, but personified, that you're in dialogue with. But focus first on those feelings. Mm-hmm. What is in your body? What wants to move? What's in your gut, your chest, your throat? The words come after. It's really about this feeling inside of you that you need to purge.
It's a good point about not being able to express fully, because in that state it can actually paralyze you, and you can just stop talking to yourself. You don't even have speech running through your head. You're just so paralyzed with fear. So in that sense, actually changing the state can just be literally going and making a cup of tea, and then and then looking at it from a different perspective.
Exactly. I mean, maybe you punch a bag for a while, or maybe any kind of gesticulation or expression could very well be part of the conversation that's happening between these perspectives.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Hi.
Hi.
So many things I'm thinking about, but one is I'm also a musician, and I think one of the blocks I have is kind of translating the joy of creating music and practicing or playing with other musicians, and then putting it on a stage. And it's not exactly anxiety, but it's just a kind of confusion about how you translate like what you really love doing into a performance.
Mm-hmm.
And I sometimes think of like a stage as a bit like a hotel room, you know, there's like, it's just inhabited every day by someone new. It's totally impersonal. Whereas when you're playing with other people, you're kind of in a room, like a living room, and you're talking,
Mm-hmm.
and you communicate in between the songs, and you have a great time. And suddenly you're on a stage and you're kind of all in a line and none of your stuff is around.
Right.
And you kind of, and that's just what we do as musicians.
Yeah.
This is where we go and perform. We go and perform on this neutral environment.
So if you had to give that a name, like first of all, let's back up a little bit. And the one word that I heard you use that popped out was confusion.
Yeah,
maybe it's
kind of.
that, maybe it's not. But if you had to name it, what would you name this pause or block that you feel?
Like a kind of road I can't see.
A road you can't see?
Mm.
So like
Like,
occlusion or a kind of blindness or...
yeah, something like that.
Which is you don't know what's on the other side of changing those contexts, which is like what you're saying is that you don't see how one translates or turns into the other one?
Yeah, I think of them as totally separate things. Like, it's great, it's brilliant fun being on stage, you know, there's that exhilaration you're talking about.
Uh-huh.
But it seems so different. It seems like it's a totally different art form.
So the key thing here is to try to personify and dial in what this pause point is for you. You said confusion and a lack of vision. Could you give it a shape defined enough so that you could begin to have this conversation with it? Just for sake of convenience, let's try to pick one or two of those and give it that name.
Integration.
Integration?
Yeah.
Like these things feel dissociated to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Slightly, yeah.
So you would like to integrate, but really, if I'm hearing you correctly, tell me if I'm wrong, what the issue is here is that they're not integrated, right?
They're sort of not integrated.
Yeah, they're dissociated or...
I mean, one solution would be to invite everyone to my house and do a gig at home.
Well, that's an interesting idea, but I think...
sort of do a different kind of...
That's kind of that's jumping to the end of the process, maybe, because maybe that is what would come out of this voice dialogue process. But I think if we were working on this within Something for Nothing, the first thing that I would try to do with you is to identify a more discrete form of what this pause point or hurdle is. And then when we've said it's confusion or it's disintegration or whatever it is, or disconnectedness, whatever that turned out to be, then we would start this process with it, which is like, that stage one where you'd walk around this idea of the confusion or the disconnection. And then stage two, you would speak to it directly and tell it what you don't appreciate about it, what the issues are that you have with it. Stage three, you would become the disconnection. You would speak from the disintegration, and you would voice positively from your perspective as that reality what your view of this situation is and what you are missing actually on the other side.
So like, is it like the disintegration might say that there isn't disintegration, they're just two different things?
No, I would say that this process is that all those perspectives are valid, and it is the work of including them all that brings us new insights. So it's not to say there's no such thing as disintegration. There is. You feel that, it's real, it's there. The process is your perspective as well, looking at disintegration is valid and important, and that the two of those in conversation, you wanting some kind of integration and confronting this block of disintegration, in exchange and conversation in this process will form a new third point, which will be a new insight that includes but transcends both of those perspectives. And they always all are still included moving forward. The point is not to get to a point in your life where you don't have a feeling of disintegration. The point is to open up a new dimension, a third dimension, fourth, of what is beyond that transcends but includes them both. That makes sense?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Interesting.
I'm just mindful of time, because I know we could go on all day, but we've
Right.
got a few questions I want to just come to from the live stream. Then also one of the questions, like legit question, or the thing is people asking about the course. we were going to come to it anyway, but we've been asked for it. So, but before we come to that, let's just touch on Cameron was asking about the relationship between creativity and madness, and sometimes it can feel like that. And I guess really the essence of the question is, do we need to go through that pain and suffering? And if we are in that pain or suffering, how do we hold that and be with that?
Well, first of all, I don't necessarily think that pain and suffering and madness should automatically be conjoined in that fashion. So maybe I could just come at them each individually and try to do it quick, because I know we're kind of locking down. Madness and creativity is definitely its own special category. It's not necessarily the focus and drive of what Something from Nothing is about, but I get why that comes up as a question. And I think that what they have in common, I can be totally transparent and say I definitely have had periods of my life where I have not felt that I had the mental faculties all put together to be a normal functioning person. I definitely feel that I have dunked below the waterline of sanity on occasion, and so I'm not totally unfamiliar with the madness. It's a different seminar and those are different stories, but I've been there. And what madness has in common with real Something from Nothing and cutting edge creativity is that both of them punch through membranes, both of them punch through thresholds. And so, as Tammy Simon was describing in her 5-minute clip, a truly innovative artist or spiritual teacher or creator is going to bring fresh, singular new water, an emergent property or feature that was not there before. They're going to put their reach into a place that we have not been to before. That's punching through the membrane. That's crushing over a threshold. Madness as well, sometimes on the dark end, sometimes on the pathological end, but also maybe sometimes just in the fact that a really visionary person may be so far exceeding the societal center of gravity that madness may be the most appropriate term for it, or people's psyches can actually disintegrate as well. But that madness also punches through a membrane, and they're not totally unrelated. I mean, we find lots of instances of artists who traffic in a realm and an atmosphere that is not the day-to-day function of most people. Some of it's pathology, some of it's breakthrough work, and they do have a little bit of overlap, in my opinion. So that's that. But on the suffering side and the pain side, I think that's a different issue. And the response for me in my life is that it's not that we have to suffer or we don't have to suffer. It's not that we need our creative process to be ecstatic and blissful, or we need it to be full of pain and punishment. It's that we need it to be creative. And who you are as a creative person is going to be unique to you. Maybe it involves a lot of pain and difficulty and suffering. Maybe it involves a lot of bliss. Maybe they alternate. And I think what's really critical in Something from Nothing is focusing on you realizing the full range of your creative genius and offering, and whatever the components are that your unique engine and makeup includes, we need to include those and we need to work with them. Could be suffering, could be bliss, both.
Yeah, that's great. There's also a question around, and we're going to paraphrase a little bit, but around it's like we have something that we love. And I give you an example from my life. I was saying that I love playing the guitar, but it wasn't my creative thing. And when one of the tendencies we can all have is, this is kind of the essence of it, of comparing ourselves to other people which are great. Like, if we listen to music, we tend to listen to the great musicians. If we like art, we tend to go to museums or art galleries and look at the great artists. And we don't see a lot of stuff kind of elsewhere on the spectrum. And that can be a kind of almost an impossible thing to compare ourselves against. It's like we have something that we love and we want to be creative, and it might be at a hobby level, it might be if you're a musician playing at kind of open mics. Maybe we're never going to be world class, but that whole story that we should be, or comparing ourselves against that, like how to navigate that.
I think that comes back to the difference between a hierarchy and a holarchy. And so in a hierarchy, for instance, we would see this graded, evaluated, kind of popular assessment of what is good or what is bad. And trust me, I'm not a relativist. I'm not into the postmodern relativism. There's great art and there's shit art, and that's a fact of life. However, what is a deeper fact of life is that the intrinsic fundamental value of the artist, the creator, and the creative process is this holarchy. And the depth and reach of what is going to transpire in a creative process is the fundamental value and treasure that's brought forth in the creative process. So, like, for instance, the part of relativism that is also true as well is that from whose perspective? I mean, let's start with the fact that the sun is going to expand and swallow every single creative artifact on this planet. So, legacy? No. There is no actual legacy of anything other than the one that I think we're touching on here, which is we have this amazing opportunity to participate in the lineage of something from nothing, which after the sun expands and swallows our artifacts is going to continue on. And those atoms are going to shoot out and probably form who knows what, maybe other forms of life. But am I, like, take for instance with my painting, I am a terrible painter in almost any regard that you could think of. I love all the painters that I love, from Kandinsky to Leonora Carrington to Dali to Pollock, every painter that I love that has changed my life, I can't even remotely do, it just is grotesque if I try to do what they've done. And I wanted to so bad. I mean, for the longest time I was like, and my dad's a painter and everything, I was like, I'm going to figure this out. It's not going to happen. It's not meant to be. Every single painting I touch that way turns to turds. So, but I knew I wanted to paint, and I felt such love and passion for painting in the lineage of painters. And slowly, 10 years in, I backed my way into a form of calligraphy painting, because I love languages, and one of my hobbies is I created a language. And I was writing poetry in this language, and then that slowly morphed into creating images within the poetry of this language. And my totem animal is crows. And so, long story short, what ended up happening is that I would paint micro calligraphy of these crows. Now, it's not whether I'm the greatest one of these. I'm the only one who does this. It's just like, I'm the only one who speaks this language, really. I'm the only one who knows what these poems mean. And the crows aren't ugly. People don't probably stand before them and feel what they do in front of a Van Gogh. But when I make these paintings, I feel so absorbed and engrossed in what I'm doing that I lose track of time and everything dissolves, and I know I'm in the right place and I know I'm doing the right thing and my hands are touching the right things. And that's what it's about. Now, from a holarchy, the depth of what is occurring for me as an entity in the embrace of this succession of events with the crows is life-changing. I know people don't stand before those canvases, but it's no less undeniable for me that I should be doing that. And I think that's probably I wish the whole world worked that way. I wish that's how we felt about creativity, and that we didn't think, I'm going to make a record, and if it doesn't hit, and I've done this. I'm going to make a record, and if it's not in the top 40, fuck it, it's a piece of shit and it failed.
And if we're talking about this as a lineage, that's kind of like saying being on a spiritual path and not getting enlightened, it was all worthless.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like if we still move and we still progress and we take joy in the journey of it.
Absolutely.
It has an inherent value.
I mean, it's a really funny thing, actually, that we do when you think about it. It's like, when you cuddle your 5-year-old kid and love them up, are you totally obsessed with if that will have the right effect on them so that when they're 10, they have the greatest posture of any 10-year-old? Like, no one thinks that way with love and kids, but we do it with everything we make artwork-wise. And so I think that's another myth that we can back off of and let go of.
So we haven't got much time left, but I want to spend some time exploring the course. We've been referencing it through the time of the workshop. It's a 6-month online course, and we'll go through the modules in a moment, taught by, obviously, you, Stuart, but also with these expert interviews with people like Tammy Simon, Ken Wilber, Steve Beckett. And we've seen clips from those in this event, but there are whole interviews. And there's 3 hours with Ken, there's half an hour with Tammy, about an hour with Steve, and there'll be some more probably of those that will come online as well. Yeah. But say a little bit about the 6 core modules.
Yes, so The first module, which is not here today, but will begin in March.
About a month, yeah.
In about a month. The first module is authoring your project. So today we've kind of walked through these steps of familiarizing ourselves with this lineage of something from nothing and seeing that as this primordial creative lineage. And then from that, making it obvious and laying open the opportunity to claim your place within the tradition. I mean, really, like I said, you are actually in this tradition whether or not you want to claim it. It's just a matter of how involved you want to be in it. How much do you want to cultivate that deep, brooding mystery that's like running under the subterranean plates of all of our consciousness and our souls? That's fascinating to me and basic. So that's the second question. Do you want to jump in? How deeply do you want to jump in? Here's a 6-month period of practicing, exploring, and cultivating this with other folks, all of us around the same prime directive. So having identified that and claiming your place in the lineage, we took a little brief sampling today of some of the tools, techniques, and methodologies that will apply in the 6-month period, working with shadow. State training is a big one. Those are modules themselves, yeah. I'll touch on. So the first module in March is going to be authoring your project. You will have arrived on day 1 in March with us with some familiarity based on this 3-hour live stream of, through practicing Dian and the other methodologies, what your project might be. And then based on that, we're going to take the architecture and scaffolding that we have available to us through all of these creative domains and also some integral informed approaches, and make a map with you of steps over those next 6 months, inside and outside practices, so both working on your inner creative self, but then also having the accountability to execute on tasks at each one of those markers. And however unique and individual, whatever it is you want to make, we're going to make that map with you in the first module and set out the plan from day 1 to the last day so that you are, well, I'll get to those modules later on. So that's number 1, making and authoring your project. Number 2 is state training, which we, again, had a little bit of taste of today, but not deeply. We'll get into a menu of esoteric witnessing practices. A big one is subject-object relations. We did not touch on this so much today, but it's basic to human development and it's basic to the creative development. Subject-object relations is basically taking the content of yourself that you currently identify with. So it could be any feature. I'm a man, I sit in chairs, I'm bipedal, whatever it is, I'm a songwriter, I work in this office, I'm, a below average bowler, just whatever the facets are that actually matter to you in your identity. We take those in your subject and give you practices to move them into a position as objects in your awareness, and slowly through the repeated consistent application of these subject-object practices, you feel yourself. That subject actually keeps moving backwards, and a very curious thing happens in this reverse conveyance of the subject. You notice that everything that arises, actually you experience that everything that arises in the cosmos is an aspect of yourself, but is not yourself. And that becomes really mysterious. And as Tammy Simon was saying, as an artist and a creator, the deeper and longer and more consistently you practice subject-object relations and move the seat of your subject backwards, you tip from gross into subtle realms and then into causal realms until you back over into nothing itself, as she was describing that big, amazing, pregnant nothing. It is not the absence of reality, but the geyser, which issues it in every minute. So, Module 2, state training. Module 1, authoring your project. Module 2, state training. Module 3, a really fun one, which you cannot miss, which is the shadow work. We had a little bit of a taste of that today when we were doing the voice dialogue process. There's other tools and techniques that we bring into the picture, but this is where the really amazing stuff is, because all of the gooey crap and the secrets and the disassociated parts of yourself, whatever you stuffed in the basement of your psyche, whatever trauma or unrealized promise that was there in your life and is still impacting you up to this day, it's my favorite thing to do. We dive right into all of that guck and shadow, and we take it from being dissociated and having an influence on us to being integrated and included, and we put it to work as one of the employees in our integrated self, our more integrated self. Pardon me. The next module is another really cool, fun one, which is, right now we're calling amazing and mundane. So another big point that everybody is tempted to pause or stop in this process of creating something from nothing is when the inspiration hits the mundane, boring crap. Like at the point when you have to, whatever it is you don't want to do, build code, write up contracts, do all the stuff with your left brain, or maybe if you're a left brain person, you don't want to do the right brain stuff, whatever your assets and liabilities are, the mundane is all of that boring crap that we're not into and is our weak spot, that we're just like, we hit that point with our project and we're like, man, I got to hire someone to do that, or I got to tackle that next year or whatever, I'm going to shove it to the edge of the desk. In this instance, we make that its own module, and we pull in all of your weaknesses and the things that you resist and avoid, and we come at them with a whole new set of practices. And why I love this module is that the truth is that nothing is mundane. That actually, if we're seeing and perceiving clearly, there is no mundane aspect to anything in the cosmos. That is misperception. However, the blocks are real. The hurdles are real. And between where we are and beginner's mind, or a new set of filters, or a new perspective through shadow work, we got to get over that hump and realize that actually forming a ledger is one of the most fascinating and miraculous things if you think of it in its appropriate context. So the mundane, the trick on the mundane thing is there's no such thing. And we begin, there's one little practice I just want to mention in passing, which is kind of fun because you're so into languages, and we've been talking about languages a little bit today, but we want to get to beginner's mind. And there's this thing called echolalia in language, which some of you may have heard of, but it's the simple repetition of a word until the word completely loses its meaning. And you will start to feel crazy. If you put yourself into a closet and repeat the word blouse 4,000 times, trust me, the word blouse will morph into a completely different reality. Just say blouse, 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 blouse. I mean, we're only 10 repetitions in, you will feel it soften. So there are other versions and modalities of echolalia. One is the literal linguistic one, but there are other mystical, spiritual, creative practices of the same approach, which can allow you to approach a mundane thing like, I don't want to work in QuickBooks. You can come at QuickBooks with the echolalia mindset and totally rediscover its other nature. It has other nature waiting in there for us. That's approaching the mundane. The module after that is launch. Module 5 is launch. And this is 5 months into the 6-month process. You have acquired these new tools. You have applied these new techniques. You're going to have a community. We're doing Google Hangouts. We're doing one-to-one interactions. There will be all kinds of we space. And through the support of this tribe and this microcosm, we get to this month 5, which you laid out in module 1. And this is your launch month. This is when it's gone from the inspiration in the invisible realm of your psyche into you changing your behavior in the real world and starting to actually build this thing, to what you have built has been received by the other people in our tribe. You've bounced it around. There's been intersubjective exchange in a safe, constructive, supportive space. From there, the launch is, it goes outside of our bubble and into the world, and you actually roll out this project that's so important to you that the next time you do your life review, when you're actually dying or when you practice dying, your life's going to look and feel differently to you because you made this thing and you finished it. And then module 6, which I think is a really important one, is the follow-up and implementation for the rest of your life. It's basically taking everything we've done in this 6-month period and then deciding how you want to stably, permanently incorporate that into who you are and how you live from here forward. My own personal experience is it's not a super hard one to do because you're already going to feel different. You're going to be a different person. The creative projects that I've gone through in my life that really meant something to me just changed me. And it wasn't the difficulty of stabilizing those changes. It was that I didn't want to let it go. I fell so much in love with it that you want to eat it. It's that tactile. It's that like your connection with it is truly tantric. And so I think it's less about can we stabilize this? Can we turn it into a permanent way we live our life? It's more of like, what are the exciting things that we can create from there? Who are my new friends? What's the new way I want to go out and conduct myself in life? What do I think is possible now that I did this thing that I wasn't able to do up until then? And how do I fundamentally feel different about myself as a member of this lineage and something from nothing?
I want to do this course.
You're in. You're in.
Maybe just a few little things, people as well, that people can come to this that already they're really clear on what the project is. They can come if they're not so clear on the project. People can come to this course if they define themselves as an artist or someone that perhaps is an entrepreneur or wants to set up their business as a therapist or consultant, anything which is about bringing yourself into the world, basically.
Yep.
This is for them.
It's totally true. I mean, we said in one of the little clips we put together, like, if you're an astronaut or a novelist, any conceivable, there's just no human being alive, like I said, who's not a member of this lineage and doesn't have something unique to offer. Maybe it is an offering to the world, but maybe it's really about your life or a relationship with one other person. Any conceivable creation is appropriate for this process.
And so if people want to join this course, then you need to become a premium member of Conscious 2. And you can pay monthly, you can pay yearly, 2 yearly, you can pay for a lifetime. And obviously it gets cheaper per payment or per month as you choose the different options. Not only will they give you access to something from nothing, the 6 modules, the expert interviews with Tammy Simon, Ken Wilber, Steve Beckett, and others. It'll also give you access to the Google Hangouts, where there'll be one each month, where you can actually ask questions of Stuart and interact and be part of that we space, using kind of integral terms. Signing up to Conscious 2 won't just give you access to something from nothing, give you access to the entire Conscious 2 library. That's currently over 250 hours of courses, workshops, and teachings featuring people like A.H. Almas, Ken Wilber, Byron Katie, Muji. Also some teachers you may not be aware of, but some really awesome up-and-coming teachers with some amazing content as well. Over 50 interviews, over 30, 40 different yoga sessions, and we have huge plans for things that are coming through this year. In fact, it's kind of interesting, talking about something from nothing as kind of Conscious 2 emerges over this year. We have iPhone, iPad, Apple TV apps rolling out in April, May time, a whole new upgrade of the web platform. So it kind of by the time this course is finished, you'll see a big evolution in Conscious 2 as well. So you'll be able to access the content in a whole host of different ways as things evolve. So we'd love you to become part of Conscious 2 and this growing community. So I don't think anything else you want to say, Stuart, before we close.
Just thanks to you guys for joining us here in the room, and thanks to everybody who's watching at home from all over the world, and thanks to you, Alex, for bringing me here and for doing this. I mean, I just think the only thing I'd like to close with is that I do feel that's the big privilege and fun of this gig. It's like, it's so cool. It's cool to do it on your own, and it's multiplied and amplified when you get to be with other people in a shared creative space. So I'm just super excited to see what happens in these 6 months and what the projects are that come into being.
Yeah. Well, Stu said it, but thank you very much to you guys for being here in person and kind of sharing of yourselves and your questions and experience. It really helps bring it alive, and there's been some really great stuff in there. Thank you. I also want to say a huge thank you to you, Stuart. I kind of said at the start, but you know, I work with a lot of people, but you are just a genuinely decent, awesome guy that not only is a creative genius, but you also live this as well. And I've really appreciated just hanging out with you, spending time with you. And also Steve Beckett, who you were filming with just yesterday, and we were talking a bit about the course on camera, and he came up and said, oh my God, like this is amazing, like hearing you do this. And it's a real treat to hear you in the role of teacher, not just doing the awesome creativity side. So I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And thank you to you guys watching at home. We really do hope you'll join us for the 6-month online course. You can find out more at conscious2.com/something-from-nothing-course. That's quite a lot to remember. We'll get it up on screen in a moment. You'll also see in the email that we've sent out that if you choose to sign up to Conscious 2 in the next few days to get access to the recording of this and the entire course as it comes and everything else in the library, there's a 15% discount for the next 3 days if you use the coupon code something-from-nothing. So thank you, Stuart, again. Thank you for watching, and hopefully you'll join us for this amazing feast we have coming for you the next 6 months. Bye-bye for now.